What is up, friends of the internet? Movie fans around the world. Welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Movie Show brought to you by PTE Creative. Now we're doing a little bit different format. Also, I didn't even notice your shirt yet. By the way, great shirt, Dylan.
Yeah, it would have been fitting before, but I guess I'm an idiot.
It shows how disorganized sometimes we have to be during schedules.
Yeah.
But we are doing a new format for us. It's classic with tons of YouTube and everything else around the world. It's top 10 list, but we're going to be doing our top 10 favorite comic book movies. We're not doing quality, because if we were doing quality,
Yeah.
these lists would probably be extremely different. This is kind of more of a, hey, I wanted to shout this out because it means something to me kind of thing. Not a, well, it's the highest of. We're not doing our Siskel and Ebert,
Yeah.
well, this is the highest of quality that we can get kind of thing.
Hmm.
Now,
Although a few of them would definitely be still the same.
oh, certainly. There's some that make my list because just the quality is so good
Yeah.
that it's like I'll talk about it in there, but the quality's so good you have to say it. But we do have one caveat that we're gonna do that Dylan's gonna explain right now.
Yep. So the way we're gonna do the lists is I'll say a movie. If it's not on Evan's list, then we talk about it immediately. If it is on Evan's list but it's lower down, we're gonna wait to talk about it until the second person announces it.
Yeah, so we're not double talking movies.
Yeah.
Now I should have asked you prior. Do you have an honorable mention? I did give an honorable mention just in case you made one.
Um, I had two:
Okay.
Wonder Woman, and Spider-Man: Far From Home.
So Wonder Woman is on my list, so we can wait to talk about
Yeah.
Wonder Woman. What about Far From Home is like just speaks to you?
I like Tom Holland's Spider-Man the most.
Yeah.
I think he's by far the best Peter Parker. Um, on his Spider-Man movies, he kind of gets into like that the new thing they're doing with like he's CGI like a lot of the time,
Yeah.
which is really annoying. But I really like Tom Holland's, and that's probably the one I like the most out of his trilogy.
Really? That's a
Yeah.
controversial opinion for a lot of people.
I think I have it different than almost everyone else because mine goes 2, 1, 3.
Well, okay, so I don't. I would probably go 2, 3, 1. But two is probably the most controversial top, so we both agree with that. Um, I just think Far From Home is so good. I'm glad. Like I thought about Far From Home, but it's too far in the Marvel annals
Yeah,
for like. I have a decent spread here of movies because I did want to kind of represent all the different aspects of comic book movies that I really do enjoy.
yeah,
Um, and now I'm thinking I have two honorable mentions now, not just one. Um, but yeah, Far From Home is just such a good movie. Jake Gyllenhaal does such a good job as Mysterio.
yeah. And I think it has the best sequence out of any of the Tom Holland movies. The one where he's like inside Mysterio's like concoction. You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah,
Where it's like 100% fantasy.
and it's got like the zombie Tony Stark Iron Man. It's got
Yeah,
yeah, no, that's tremendous. I think that's a really good uh, sequence to highlight in that film. It's a great way to, even though it's somewhat cheap when you really think about it, because it comes on so fast. It's a great way to start getting people to dislike Spider-Man. To give like the J. Jonah Jamesons of the world a reason to just be like, Spider-Man, man.
yeah,
So it's a highly. I also love that it takes Spider-Man out of New York. Like
yeah,
there's a part of me because I don't personally connect with New York. I don't like New York all that much as a place to go even like that. I enjoy my time when I'm there, but I'm very much like I'm doing this thing. I'm doing this
yeah.
thing both times I've been in New York. It's like it's for a thing, but when I'm just in the city, I'm kind of like, okay, that's cool. So it's fun to see him outside of New York and actually have to play in that bigger world, so to speak. It's a good honorable mention. Um, I have two honorable mentions now because I probably should have put this on the list, but I think it just gets eked out. V for Vendetta is a high honorable mention for me. It's always in the contest of top 10. I think it's just such a phenomenal film.
I do not enjoy that movie.
Oh, why? Why don't you like that movie?
I don't. It's like even from the first time I saw it, I never enjoyed it. I have no idea
Really?
why. I just something about the story just does not speak to me in any way at all.
I think it's certainly what I love that it's pretty faithful to the comic book and improves upon the comic book and the fact that Evie isn't just like kind of a moron. She has more of a heart and soul to her in this rendition. Um, I just love the comic booky aspects putting into reality, but they're not so comic booky that you can't. They're intangible. Um,
Hmm.
it's something like, oh no, you could. It's very palpable in today's day and age, the age that we grew up in, the post 9/11 era, where everyone's just as suspicious about government all the time.
Yeah,
Not that they weren't suspicious of the government already; that certainly was. But there was that time from like Reagan until 9/11 where you started being like, no, maybe not. Like, yeah, whether you were, didn't matter when what president was in office, you could kind of be like, I don't know. The second like 9/11 happens, and you lose all your faith. You're just like, fuck this. This government sucks.
yeah,
I believe this government would do anything to fuck anybody over, kind
yeah.
of thing.
It's
Um,
it's funny because overall the movie's like kind of pessimistic in a way, which should speak to me because that's exactly what I am. But yeah, maybe if I rewatched it nowadays, I would like it more. But last time I saw it, I didn't enjoy it
when
either.
was the last time you watched it?
It had to be at least 10 years ago.
I was gonna say I think you might actually quite enjoy that with more of the subtext. Um,
Yeah, because
because
I would have been 19, 20. Yeah,
yeah, so it just spoke to me a lot early, and then every time I've ever watched it since, I'm like, yeah. And a second honorable mention for me is actually Aquaman. I adore Aquaman.
it's fine.
It's what I think is the reason I'm so drawn to it is it's just a fun adventure movie set within like
Yeah.
it's a good genre film with a comic book hero, and it just works. Like you immediately, even though he's extremely flawed, you like Arthur Curry. You want to root for Aquaman,
Mhm.
and you understand the struggle a lot.
Yeah, I think for me it's just fine because the central like love story in it for me just doesn't work at all. Amber Heard and Jason Momoa have no chemistry at all, and
I
it's
wouldn't
kind of
say
like the
no
same.
chemistry, but I think
It's
it's not world beating good.
yeah. It just it suffers the same thing as Man of Steel for me, where the central relationship you're supposed to care about is the one I don't care about at all.
Interesting.
And it doesn't help that Amber Heard is not a great actress.
Yeah, that doesn't. I mean, she was appealing in this movie. I will say that, but it certainly, when some of your best acting credits are you being a zombie in Zombieland. I don't know how well that
Mm-hmm.
speaks to you as an actress.
Yeah,
So it's certainly interesting to say the
drinking some Mountain Dew Code Red.
least. Certainly, it is up there. I think those are fun honorable mentions. It always like it's so dumb sometimes when you think of the honorable mention category, but it's just like you don't want to. There's always something on the fringe you don't want to really like leave off. We just have the
Yeah.
same we have the same problem over on the football show where top 10 quarterbacks. You're like, there's not really top 10 quarterbacks. There's like top 12, or you got to cut it down to 8.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a whole tier of guys that like could be in, could be not. So it's the same tier
Yeah.
issue that's always really fun, which is why rankings are both so dumb and also the best thing that ever happened to the internet, because it's just endless discussion and debate for funsies. All right, You are up with
I think
number 10, though.
I think yeah. I was gonna say I think I should start off because I know for a fact we're not gonna talk about it for a while. It's Avengers Endgame.
Oh, yeah, that's high up on my list, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So that's why I said I should start.
Only 10. Woof.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll I'll get into it later. Yeah,
alrighty, alrighty. My number 10 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
don't talk about it yet.
Okay. I mean, we're
My
in the same ballpark at the very least.
yeah, my number 9 is X-Men: Days of Future Past.
You can talk about it. It missed my cut. It's a great movie, but it missed my cut.
Yeah, I think had I not rewatched it like pretty recently, last month I think I watched it. I think I would have had it way higher. I think it would have been like 4 or 5 for me. But
Wow.
I actually kind of liked it less than I thought I did because I remember really loving this movie, and I still really like it. Um, but yeah, it fell a little bit.
I think that's especially if you're in a world in which, so obviously not many people of the general public are in podcast world, internet world, where they have to do this. But even if you're just a big fan of movies and you want a framework for yourself, you do need to rewatch movies because there's that whole sacred cow nature to it, or you're like, same thing
Well,
we just talked about on Batman versus Superman. I fucking
yeah,
loved that movie the first time I watched it, and now I'm like,
movies. Yeah, movies will speak to you differently in different ages.
yes, and that's why I try to at least, unless they're just like evergreen, where I like my brain just protects them and I have to be in the space to watch them. I always try to I rewatch movies all the time because
Yeah,
it allows
and
me to keep the framework on them.
if you don't like something, that doesn't mean it's always going to be bad too. Because I remember trying to watch The Shining. I think I was like 12 years old, and I turned it off because I thought it was boring.
Yep.
And then I gave it another chance when I was probably like 17, and I was like, what was I thinking?
Again, it's when you watch it, how it speaks to you. It's the same thing of when we eventually get to, we were saving this for down the road. We're gonna do eventually like a whole top 100 movies, which is gonna be really fun and really chaotic later on in life. But
Yeah,
um, it's the same thing. There's movies on that list that you probably haven't seen in decades, but you're like, yep, made an impression, absolutely love it. And if you watched it now, you'd be like, I don't know, like, or there's movies that,
you know what I just rewatched too? That I mean, it's obviously shit,
yeah,
but I loved it as a kid. Master of Disguise. I just
oh yeah,
rewatched
that
it.
was one of your favorites.
Yeah, I love that movie.
But again, yeah, it's certainly it's something that it's when it speaks to you and what is it doing for you. And I think that's another reason why I love the idea of starting with the comic book movies, because so many comic book movies, if I am into the character and I'm prepared like that, those mid-teen those mid-teen years of 2010 to 2020, I was reading so many comic books and I was just
Yeah,
so invested in that world. Like sports wasn't really in my forefront anymore. It was far more fiction and comic books, that I was so prepared and so ready that anything that was even remotely comic booky that I liked, I was just like in love with. Whereas
yeah,
now it's not that I don't have the same love that I normally do. I certainly do. I'm just a little bit more like, there's a little
yeah.
bit more nuance to it. Where, like I said, first time I watched Batman vs Superman, adored it. But I was thinking of the moment where, like, perfectly recreating the cover of Dark Knight Returns, or perfectly doing something from Batman, like, oh, that great detail, that great shot.
Mhm.
Not thinking about, this is a really chaotic mess of a story. What the fuck are we talking
Yeah.
about here?
And I should also mention that the one I watched was Days of Future Past, the Rogue cut,
Ooh, okay.
which that was the first time I had ever seen it, which I think might have caused it to drop because it drags a little bit more, I think.
That's probably why they
But
cut it.
yeah, it's fun to see Rogue back, but yeah, it's not needed at all.
I've never seen the
Um,
Rogue cut. What happens in the Rogue cut?
It's Kitty, what's her name? Kitty Pryde,
Kitty
right?
Pryde, yeah. Shadowcat,
Yeah,
yeah.
she accidentally gets like stabbed or slashed by Wolverine
Yeah.
as he's like looking out on the table.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then they need to get Rogue so she can take her power to keep Logan in the past.
Do they do like Blink or whatever where they use portals to get from place to place to find her or like
No, they break into the mansion because she's being held in Cerebro.
huh.
Yeah, I can't remember the reasoning. Oh no, it's because James McAvoy, Professor X in that movie doesn't have his powers for like
Yeah.
the majority of it. Yeah, so that's probably why they could get away with that. But that's what I really like about the movie is it's always going to be pretty much down to Wolverine and Professor X. Like, if you don't care about them, you're not probably going to care about the movie. But I mean, Hugh Jackman, he's great. There's no denying it.
Well, that's the insane part about the entire X-Men. X2 does not make my list, but
Oh, it's on mine.
I recently rewatched it, and anytime I saw Wolverine, I was like, God damn, he's good. And then every time he does Wolverine, like I even watched X3, The Last Stand recently, because I just was like I was on a just it's because I was watching X-Men '97. I was like, I just want more X-Men, so I'm just gonna
Yeah,
watch it. And like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine in X3, great. The rest of the movie around it, trash. I will rewatch Wolverine movies just for Hugh Jackman. Like even if you want to say X Men Origins Wolverine sucks, which it 1,000% does, you can't say Hugh Jackman sucks. The story
no,
sucks, but Hugh Jackman
yeah,
does not suck.
yeah. That movie, I just rewatched it. It is not good.
I think an argument certainly could be made that the brilliant, not that Wolverine was already wildly popular and is the very logical choice for a studio to say we want Wolverine to be the center of our X-Men universe,
Mhm.
but the power of Hugh Jackman in that role just even further reinforces it's
Yeah,
Wolverine and the X-Men. It's not the X-Men with
yeah,
Wolverine.
yeah. I guess just to like wrap up Days of Future Past, it's really like the best of both worlds because you get Michael Fassbender and you get Ian McKellen, and then
Mm-hmm.
you get James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart. You get Hugh Jackman back, and then like some of the like rotating people, and they introduce some like fun characters like Blink. Yeah,
Yeah, Blink, Thunderbird, they're all in there, and it's. I think that's where I wish there was more of that in the X-Men movies in general. Was just introduce cool shit for cool shit sometimes. That's part of the fun of the X-Men comics and the X-Men
well,
world.
they fuck themselves with their continuity. My
Oh.
God, it's a mess.
Well, that was the worst part is you do prequels, but then the prequels are every 10 years, but yet they don't age 10 years and you're like,
Yeah, or they just completely ignore them.
"Oh, like when they get to Dark Phoenix and it's the fucking 90s and you're like,
Oh,
"Hold on.
I haven't even seen that movie,
You don't
and I
need to."
like X Men a lot.
I know you really do like the X-Men. The X-Men is what the X-Men and the Justice League are what get you to read comic books. So,
Yeah,
you love the big team up stuff, which is
yeah.
fair. Um,
Which is funny because I actually kind of don't like that in the movies.
yeah.
It's kind of weird. Yeah.
But I mean that's the struggle of the X-Men. There's a reason that when they really center on one character, two characters, three characters, you're fine. When you start trying to do 8 different storylines all within the same movie, you're like,
Yeah.
um,
Don't worry. We're gonna talk more X Men later.
oh yeah. But Days of Future Past is a phenomenal movie. A lot of good sequences. The only thing I will say about Days of Future Past that always was a hiccup for me was this is post Avengers, so they're figuring out how to do team up movies, and just it feels just too like Avengers light for me. Not it's like I don't want to see a yellow stripe and the claw marks to see Wolverine's suit. Just fucking give me the Wolverine suit the best you can.
Yeah,
Just I don't want to
but
see the newer renditions of the old costumes. Fucking just go all out and just make it comic booky because that's what
yeah,
like the audience will allow it because they know it and they love it.
yeah. It's funny because they kind of screwed themselves over with that as well because the X-Men actually has a consistent tone,
Yeah.
except X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Hmm.
That's the one that feels like goofy,
Yeah.
but yeah, they kind of screwed themselves with that too because they were like, "Take us seriously."
Yeah. So it is certainly a fun, um, certainly very fun though, and great film. You can't argue it's a good film. Number 9 for me. I've got 3 that are kind of in a mesh area right now, so that's why I was like, which one do I really like the most? I'm gonna go with Wonder Woman at 9. Um, I think Wonder Woman for me, we just rewatched it. I think I mentioned that on the show.
Yeah.
Um, because we were watching Batman versus Superman, and for having to suffer through that with me, my wife's like, "Hey, we're watching Wonder Woman." I was like, "Sure." And I thoroughly enjoyed it again. And the ending sequence that I didn't think was that good actually was a lot better than I thought it was. And I was like, "Oh, I, I thought it was that. I thought it was so bad that I was just like, oh god, no." And I was like, you know what? It's not as.
The,
It's actually pretty fun. It's not
the
great.
end
It's fun.
the ending of that movie is why it didn't make my list. I'll just put it that way.
But I will say that this is again. I think Patty Jenkins does a phenomenal job introducing this character. It's a great balance of what does it mean to be a woman and what does it mean to be a superhero in today's modern age, and how do those two mesh? Because
Hmm.
ever since the 90s, we've been getting hypersexualized. That is comic books. It's always hypersexualized. It's always anatomically perfect, so to
Yeah.
speak. So there's an element to that where even like Joel Schumacher's like suit up montages in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, they always have to highlight the ass. They always have to highlight something. So even the men are getting that too. But it's a great way to balance the femininity of Wonder Woman without just being like, oh, she's eye candy for the guys. It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not the fucking point. And I will say, it's still has one of the most powerful scenes I've ever seen ever. That No Man's Land sequence when she's coming out of the trench is one of the best shot scenes I have ever seen in any movie ever. It is so
It,
emotional. It's so good.
that is a great sequence. I agree.
I will
I
go back and
also,
watch that scene over and over and over again because I just get goosebumps and teary eyed every time I watch it because I'm like, this is so
yeah,
good.
I don't know who did the score, but I'd also shout out the score to Wonder Woman. I think it's actually pretty good.
It's a really good score. I just think it's an origin story told really, it done really well. Also acknowledging a really screwed up origin story that's got like 3 different legs to it, and honoring all 3 without being disrespectful, but also making sense of things. Um,
Hmm.
if
And actually,
Yeah,
another reason it works is because Chris Pine and Gal Gadot, they have chemistry.
they have mad
Like
chemistry. You cannot say they don't have
it,
chemistry.
that's why the movie works for me.
It is certainly
And Chris Pine is just charming as he's as charming as can be.
he's charming as fuck. You can't argue otherwise. And when you watch that movie, there's so many powerful scenes to it. I just remember being in the theater. So the first time I watched it, Ab was actually because that came out in June. I think it was like June 17th, like 2017 or whatever. Was Ab was actually in China, so they went and saw that in China together as a big group. And she said every woman that was a part of their group was just in tears, being like, "This is our hero," which is really important.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah,
You might not know the answer.
sure.
When they watched it in China, was it dubbed?
So I think they went to the edition with Chinese subtitles.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was wondering if they did dubbing or subtitles.
because we had a similar experience that year where the next month I went. on our. I flew out to Asia, met Ab, and that's where we did our honeymoon in Thailand. And just so I had like a touch of familiarity, because it's the first time I ever left the states, we saw Spider-Man Homecoming in Thailand, and it was so crazy because I didn't even think about it until I had to like buy the ticket. I was like, "Oh shit, is this in like Thai
Yeah.
with English subtitles, or am I getting?" And so it was an English with Thai subtitles, and I was like, "What a strange way to watch this movie." Okay,
Yeah.
um, and it was also really strange because the this is just sidebar, but the king of Thailand had passed away within the past calendar year, and we all had to stand up and give a moment of silence to the king of Thailand before the movie played. And I was like, so I get it when we're in the temples and we're doing that, although I think it's a bit absurd. I get it. Why are we doing a moment of silence for the king of Thailand before every movie? Like, that's fucked. Like, okay, whatever. I was like, can we just get to Michael Keaton's Vulture? I don't give a fuck. Can we just
I cannot I cannot stand the monarchy anymore. It's
yeah.
just so
It
ridiculous.
doesn't matter what country it is. It's not shitting on Thailand. It's just shitting on any monarchy. We don't
Yeah.
get monarchies. It's just like, what is happening?
Like everyone is like literally the same. They're just a human. And then all of a sudden he's just better than everyone. No,
Right.
that's not how it works.
It was just very strange. It was a strange experience. It was a great movie, but it's a strange experience. But I remember going back to see Wonder Woman again with Ab, and just seeing her in tears, and seeing friends of mine in tears because they had this representation that they had never seen, and it was like, this is what it means for a woman to be a hero. And that's where I was just like, yeah, I get it. This is great. And that No Man's Land scene coming out of the trench and marching forward with the score is so good that the rest of the movie could be absolute dog shit, and that would still be one of the best scenes I've ever seen, ever. So, Wonder Woman, my 9.
One second, I'm just grabbing my picks.
I like how you're going to show Blu-ray pics on the show.
Might as well give a visual aid.
Visual aid.
So my number 8, we're diving right back into X-Men. Logan.
I have Logan at.
It's on your list
I think I have Logan at the exact same spot, if I'm being honest.
at 8.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's talk about it.
What a fucking good movie, first of all.
Before the Batman with Robert Pattinson, this was like my favorite, like real superhero movie. Like it does not feel big and grand at all.
No. It feels incredibly grounded. It feels it finally has consequences for some of the actions
Yeah,
beforehand, which is really good. Um,
yeah. And Wolverine is like aging. His like healing isn't working as
yeah,
properly as it was before.
he's dying, and you're getting to see the consequences of 200 years of action.
Yeah,
And
because that's kind of one of the things that doesn't work for me in the X-Men movies is like literally he can get shot in the head and then he'll just come back in 2 minutes.
right, and so it's one of those where in Logan, I don't think I will say this. People, I don't think, will ever realize the importance of Logan to the actual lineage of X-Men in terms of movie X-Men. That is by far the best piece X-Men ever did, is Logan.
Easily. Well, not my personal favorite, but I would say best. Yeah.
It's definitely its best. And when you look at, it's almost all very contentious relationships. There's not a whole
Yeah.
lot of there's not like a buddy anywhere. Whereas at least like the other X-Men movies, there's like some are friendly, some are foe. Where it's just
Well,
everyone's so contentious with each other.
even in a loving relationship with Professor X, there's still like a kind of like an annoyance almost,
Yes.
where it's like you're taking care of an elderly person who's literally losing his mind, and when he does, he can kill people.
Yeah, and I just love how that is it plays logically as to, okay, if the X-Men were to die, it's logical these would be A, the two that did survive,
Yeah,
and B, it's also logical as to why when there is just such an ode responsibility from Logan that he's just like this, like you can tell he's like, this fucking sucks. I hate it.
yeah,
I absolutely hate my existence, but I love and respect this man too much to quit.
yeah. I'm sure you've read the comic. Is Professor X in the Old Man Logan
No.
story?
Old so
Well,
they were very
kudos to the
liberal.
writers then,
I would
because
say
I
that
actually think
they wrote a hell of a
I
movie.
think that's the yeah I think that's the best part of the movie is Professor X like kind of deteriorating and then like because it's always hinted at that he's like the most powerful mutant alive, but you never really see it. And this is a way where you can see it like unleashed.
Right. And I think that's where this becomes such a personal story that it can't be outdone by the other films. It just can't. Like the
Mhm.
I think the closest they come is probably First Class with Magneto and Professor X, but this is you're seeing 30ish, 40ish years of a relationship between two people, all of their ups and downs, and the balancing of their ideals and the balancing of their needs. And when you add X-23 to that mix, it's so good.
Yeah,
There's slight moments that I don't like solely because it shits on the comic books. But it's always just a way forward, and it's such a good personal story with Logan.
yeah. It keeps the backbone of the X Men franchise, Wolverine and Professor X.
It's
It's
and that
really
that's
smart.
that's kind of the perfect send off for the X-Men
Yeah,
franchise. And then of course they caught fire with First Class and Days of Future Past. So then they're like, let's just keep doing it, and that would have been a really nice way. I almost wish Logan was released in like 2019, right at the start of negotiation, where Marvel could have said like, hey, maybe keep that fucking Dark Phoenix film on the shelf. Let Logan end it because there'd be so much better. The goodwill towards the X-Men franchise would be even higher because people would be coming
yeah,
off of Logan and going like, God, yeah, you're right. It wasn't always perfect, just like life, but so good. We always loved the X-Men. But when you get Apocalypse and you're like, then you get Logan, you're like, yay, and Deadpool 2, yay, and then you get Dark Phoenix, you're like, fuck, this sucks.
yeah. And then also the New Mutants was in there too somewhere.
And that was just a people don't even realize that was made.
Yeah, yeah. Probably like 9 out of 10 people would be like, "What?
Yeah,
What the fuck is up? What are you talking about?"
did you ever watch that movie?
No.
I did. I did not hate it, but that's because my expectations were so low that. And the other thing is this: it's incredibly flawed because it's a haunted house movie with unknown X Men that don't matter,
Hmm.
and the worst part is they're really cool characters that could be something really special, and it sucks because it's a wasted casting. Um,
Yeah.
Anya Taylor Joy as Magic is such good casting for someone who has to play in the dark side and the dark realms of the world. And she's got these uber ridiculous powers that are like tied to demons and shit. It's so good. And yet, and like she's great in it. And the rest of the movie is just kind of like there.
Yeah.
And yet you're like, okay, well, this is never getting released. No one's ever going to speak about this movie ever again. Plus, that means we can never get her as Magic again. And it wastes a great actress in a role that's perfect for her. Fuck. Like, that
I
sucks.
don't think I don't think the X Men ever had a chance of getting her to be in another movie though.
Well, yeah, this was still when she was
She's
on the come up. This is not now.
yeah. She seems pretty disinterested in franchises. It seems.
which is odd when you sign up for Furiosa, um, but Mad Max
Yeah,
is
but
kind of
that
not really a franchise. It's kind of just like single pieces of
yeah
a different world.
yeah that's true. That was your number 8 as well as mine.
That was number 8. Yeah,
Okay, my number 7, Avengers: Infinity War.
Infinity War somehow, some way did not make my list.
Oh wow.
I think it was mostly I was just trying to give some representation here because there's that weird ether zone of like 6 to 25 where like on the right day, if you caught me on the right day, I'd be like, yeah, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. The funny thing is the bummer ending of this movie. Actually, I love it,
It's yes, it's great.
and I love that they're willing to like kill off like essential people because Spider-Man bites the dust. So is Black Panther.
So many, I mean, Doctor Strange bites the dust. So many people go,
Groot.
yeah, they go the way. So many characters go the way of the dodo, and it's so important because you don't see heroes lose. You need to see heroes lose. You need to
Yeah.
see what happens, and that's truly, I think, the best part about Infinity War. The amalgamation of all these worlds together, great. The the amalgamation of all these franchises somehow finally coming together and making a very coherent story is
Hmm.
incredibly impressive. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the ending and it comes down to the villain.
Yeah.
And Thanos
Yeah. From
just
the get-go.
shines.
Yeah, he's immediately threatening.
When he brawls the Hulk and wins, you immediately know, fuck. When he has
Yeah.
when he has Thor dead to rights and Thor is only saved because of real bullshit, yeah, you're it's dead to rights. You're like this when he actually kills Loki, and you know Loki actually dies for once, not just like
Hmm.
oh Loki I'm dead, and then there's a and then he comes back the next time around. When you see him snap Loki's neck, kick the Hulk's ass, and beat Thor down, you immediately know shit's real. That is heel
Yeah.
building 101. That is good old pro wrestling 101 heel building. Take some
Hmm.
of your biggest guns and just let them die to this guy. So
Yeah.
when someone
And
finally does beat it, it matters.
yeah, and the way they like separate into teams, that really works for me. Because it's not just a huge ensemble doing one thing.
Right.
It's like groups of 3 to 5 going and doing their own thing. Because you got Spider-Man and Iron Man in the spaceship. Oh, Doctor Strange is
And
there
Doctor
as
Strange.
well.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you got Rocket, Groot, and Thor, which that really works for me.
That works so well.
Yeah, and then and then you also get, is that the Infinity War? Must be. Gamora dying.
Yep.
Gamora is my favorite female superhero.
Wow. Okay. There's nothing wrong
I
with
she
that pick. It's just not something
she
I would think
really
you'd say.
yeah she really works for me. I love the Guardians movies though.
Yes. So
So
Gamora is just probably
so
the least interesting of all the characters to me. So that's why
that's
I'm like,
that's
it's
true.
crazy.
Yeah, but her dying is actually like I was like, oh, that's a bummer. And that's one thing where it's like, oh, it's actually impactful.
Infinity War, I think what's super impressive about Infinity War as well is it's the focal point of the Marvel Universe in which if Infinity War doesn't work, you have wasted a decade of production.
Yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily wasted because you made money. It's not inherently like the studio thing, but you
Yeah, but
have
you could have tanked it bad.
you if that movie doesn't work, cinema as we know it is completely different.
I
And
think we're kind of getting there.
well, I mean, there's a reason we're getting Robert Downey Jr. back as Doctor Doom, because it's just like let's just bring everybody back and let's do this. It's like fuck. You
Yeah.
got to break new ground. You can't just do old stuff. Um, but it's certainly something that is it's so impactful. Infinity War is, by many people's standards, and I can easily understand the argument, the better of the two final Avengers pieces.
Yeah, I do like it more than Endgame.
I prefer Endgame to Infinity War, but you're talking to someone who their entire life's dream was to finally see a comic book universe on screen. So to finally get it, you're like, yeah. Is it perfect? No,
No.
but Infinity War is also really tight. There's no wasted motion in that. Um, it's just so heavy, but in a lighter way. It's so weird to say that, but you feel the emotions throughout, and you see
Yeah.
friendships broken, families broken, relationships broken. Such a high quality film in Infinity War.
Yep.
Um,
What's your seven?
Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Not on my list.
I fucking adore this film. This is where
This
Marvel gets real.
and this is where Marvel really starts going into making genre movies that are also superhero movies. Like this is the start of it, really.
I understand so many people are going to say, no, Avengers, like the first Avengers is the shift. And I call bullshit on that every time.
No, that's just a superhero movie, like plain and simple.
It is groundbreaking, and I adore that first Avengers film. It is, and no matter which way you slice it, you can't say it's not a great movie. It's a great movie. Winter Soldier is where Marvel turns the page from we make big movies to we make movies that people can treat very, very seriously, and you have to respect us.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Is that they're actually vying for respect, which is a necessary thing in the end, really.
Right. And that's what gives legs to it. Where even with Avengers, as good as that movie is, it could still lend itself to being a passing fad. There's still a lot of sizzle in that
Yeah,
movie, and that allows skeptics and cynics to just be like, that's that silly superhero thing, whatever. Captain America:
yeah,
Winter Soldier has none of that shit in it.
and I think even if you didn't watch the first Captain America or didn't even know who Captain America was, I think you could watch it and still enjoy it because it is just an espionage movie.
It's a political thriller espionage film, and when you're getting Robert Redford as a corrupt politician,
I think they got him 10 years too late, but
still
what are you
great,
going to do?
still fucking Robert Redford.
No, I know. He's still like A caliber, so.
I mean, he's still one of the best actors ever. Um, do you? This film takes the MCU to a different level entirely, and where this is the first time there's real emotional stakes, where you feel the relationship between Steve and Bucky. You understand your perfect hero may not be perfect, but he's
Mhm.
trying to be perfect because that's just who he is. Like
Yeah.
Captain America in the MCU is what people need Superman to be. He does the right
Yeah.
thing for the right thing, but he still does have his little character flaws
Yeah.
here or there, but they're rooted in the utmost good.
Yeah. It's like trying to do the most overall good, but you might make mistakes along the way.
And that is
And
where it's
that's
so
a good
good.
hero.
It is such a good hero, and it's such a good movie. It's one of those that I don't watch that often, and then every time I come back to it, I'm like, do I like this as much as I think I do? And then every time I come back to it, I'm like, no, I do. This is a
Yeah.
tremendous movie.
That might be worth a rewatch because I think it's been quite a while since I've seen it.
But it introduces new characters. It continues Cap's story in such a good way where he's not perfect. I love the fact that they're telling the fish out of water, but he's not a bumbling idiot. Where like so many times the fish out of water stories, they have moments to shine and they're bumbling morons. Where it's so logical that he's like, I love the fact he just keeps a little diary notebook and he's just like, Star Wars is in it. Star Trek, like
Hmm.
pop culture shit that he missed to understand people. It's not like a, oh, I'm a nerd and I have to watch Star Wars. It's,
Yeah.
oh, to understand people of today,
I
I need to
mean,
understand Star Wars.
yeah. I mean, he'd be like if an alien landed on Earth, pretty much, because he's starting from zero.
And it introduces Falcon in a really smart way. You already have the built-in loyalty of Avengers and the first Captain America, so you already know Sam, or you already know why Cap's a hero, so you understand why Sam would be willing to say, "Oh no, I'm willing to
Yeah.
work with this guy. He's a fucking hero." Such a good character growth with Black Widow in this film. This is what
Hmm.
really does makes Black Widow a player. Um, and really boning up Sam Jackson to be something more than just, hey, isn't it fun? We got Sam Jackson play Nick Fury.
Yeah. He's
He
kind of he's like a side thought through most of the MCU.
and he matters in this movie,
Hmm.
and you can see the duplicitous nature to him as to why he has to do some of the things that he does. It's just so good, everything, and the covering of the
Yeah.
Winter Soldier. You really buy the Winter Soldier as a
And
threat.
I love that the elevator sequence. That's great.
There is not many more scenes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that are more badass than before we begin, does anyone want to get out? Because he's just,
Yeah.
and it's a great character moment. He's just like, if I don't have to beat you up, I don't want to. I'm going to give you the
Hmm.
chance. But if you all attack me, I'm telling you right now, you're all going to lose.
Yeah. It's a great sequence. Great
So
movie, actually, overall.
great, great movie. Adore
Um,
Captain America the Winter Soldier.
so it's my six, right?
Did you do your seven?
Yeah, Infinity War.
Oh, yeah. All right, yeah. Six.
So my six is, you've already mentioned it, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
That was your what, 10?
That was my 10.
Okay. I mean, it's Academy Award winning.
I mean, that's some of the most beautiful animation I've ever seen. Ever.
It's, well, first off, it's like the perfect animation for what it is. Like, you're never going to get a better comic book representation than that in
Yeah.
a movie. And this one and the second one, I think it's probably the most creative franchise going on in Hollywood right now. It'd be pretty hard to argue against that.
Oh, the it's the best sandbox to be able to play in. You can do anything, and yet you have to keep it grounded into we have to care. But you can do anything to make you care.
Yeah, and they're great at like putting in these characters that no one knows about. But
Except
then,
super nerds, yeah.
yeah, but then by the end, you love it. Like the team they build in the first one with like, I don't even know the names of the Spider-Man.
Spider Ham. So you have Spider Ham.
Yeah, I knew
Uh,
that one.
you have Spider Man Noir, voiced by Nicolas Cage,
Yep,
by the way, which is great.
it's
Um,
great.
you have the robot Spider Man that's piloted by the Japanese girl.
Yeah,
Can't
it's like
remember.
an anime.
Yeah, I can't remember what the full name of that Spider Man is. And then you have Peter B. Parker, Miles Morales, and Spider Gwen, and who is
Yeah.
phenomenal. I'm a huge Spider Gwen fan, and Miles Morales is the Spider Man that I prefer. That's my favorite Spider Man is Miles.
Mhm.
It's just the one that speaks to me more. So to get Miles on screen, A is just tremendous, but to do it in such a, I love that he's unapologetically black. He's unapologetically just a teen. That's just
Well,
like he's not trying to be
that
Peter Parker. He's just trying to be
and that
himself. I love that shit.
yeah, and that's one of the nice things about the movie is like they don't focus on that at all,
No.
and the movie's better for it. Not every movie has to hit you over the head with, "Hey, he's a black superhero."
Yeah.
Like it's much better if you just treat it casually because then you're focusing on the story.
Well, I think they have the right balance here. I think it's important, especially in the emergence of all these heroes, that representation is important.
Hmm.
Uh, but they do it in a subtle way. They don't do it in
Yeah.
a, hey guys, look, it's Black Spider Man. They do it in a way of he lived He lives a normal life just like anybody else. He shows like it's just a showing of why anybody of any race, we're all the same in at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We want our basic needs met and we want to have a good relationship with the people in our lives. That's it. That's all there really is to it.
Yeah.
And Miles has that, but he still has he's still a teen of his race authentically and not what
Hmm.
people think people of another race are,
Yeah.
but it's not in a way of like he's a graffiti artist and he does shit that's cool because he's a teenager who likes it. It's not because he's black. But
Yeah.
it's a good way to say like, hey, this is a big part of my culture, especially in this age group, this time. It's something that
Yeah.
speaks to me, but yet at the same time, it's not like, hey guys, Black Spider Man. It's very cool to see that.
Yeah. And it's got a great cast.
I mean, it's a phenomenal cast that you almost wish could be live action.
Because it's like Jake Johnson, who I love
Yeah.
from New Girl.
Yep.
Uh, Haley Steinfeld's great as Gwen. And then you just have like, I don't want to call them bit players, but like Mahershala Ali is in this movie, which is crazy. And then you also get Nick Cage and yeah, what's John Mulaney also? It's a great cast.
I was gonna say Mulaney as Spider Ham. It's a great cast to tell a very heartfelt story, and yet allow people to see the insanity that is the Spider-Man comic book universe.
Well, that is comic books in general.
Like people that I think this is where another thing that's really understated about this movie, because it's not something that the movie itself, like the 2 hour runtime, touches on, is to me Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the first taste of real level. Holy fuck! This is how deep comic books go, and people really enjoy it. People are ready
Yeah.
for that, and it's like people are ready for multiverse. People are ready for that, but that doesn't mean you can do it cheaply. That doesn't mean you can just
Yeah.
rely on dumb tricks of like, see, there's another one, or like we can just bring
Yeah.
this character in and it doesn't matter. It still has to matter. There still has to be stakes to it. This is done in the right way, where Miles is always the focus, but there's something universal about Spider-Man, so there's something really tangible to it, and yet just getting 5 to 10 minutes of like a Nicolas Cage dreary Spider-Man noir is super fun and super cool.
Yeah.
And people are ready for a multiverse of comics that can just explode in their face and they fucking love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would actually argue this is the best Spider-Man movie in general.
I would agree. I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think any of the live action movies touch how good this movie is. And Across the
Yeah.
Spider-Verse is also a really good follow-up as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the best.
So
it's the
what's
best
your number
Spider-Man. It's the best Spider-Man of the 4 Spider-Man franchises. This is the best one.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
What was my sixth pick? What was my number 6?
Yep.
Deadpool 2.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Not on my list, that's for sure.
I enjoy so. If you ask me like, what's some of your favorite comic book movie franchises? I don't even know if Deadpool would really be on that list. But I always come back to enjoy it, and that's the one I always want to watch because it starts letting Deadpool play in a bigger world, but it's still very grounded in the bullshit reality that is Deadpool, and
Yeah.
it's really fun and enjoyable. And I think that's something that movies, again, we talk about this from time to time on the show. Sometimes movies can just be fun just for the sake of having fun. And Deadpool 2
Yeah.
feels like it's a movie that just has fun to have fun.
Yeah. The goal of the movie is to entertain. Doesn't always have to tell a message or anything.
Oh, right,
And
right.
Deadpool definitely is not going for that.
No, not at all. And it's something in which it's still very grounded. It has a good emotional story. You still have to be invested. You still have to root for the characters. But I love it. Immediately challenges your conventions, even in a Deadpool movie,
Hmm.
where you built the entire first movie as we've fallen in love. This is exactly what this character wanted. And then in the first act, you kill the woman that he loves, and immediately you're like, hold on, what? And you see his whole journey of finding the purpose behind this incredibly stupid, foul mouthed, ridiculous character. You realize
Hmm.
no, there's substance to him. That's why I love him more so than just he's funny and he kills people in ridiculously gruesome, funny ways.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in a while, but I remember enjoying it.
It's an incredibly enjoyable movie. I think it's a great take on Domino, who's a hard character to nail down in
Is
a
Domino the lucky
yeah,
one?
where her superpower is
Yeah,
luck.
I like that character a lot in that.
I still think it's one of the best sequences done in any comic book movie is when all of X Force dies on him, and it just turns out to
That
be,
is great.
and it's just
100% great.
him and Domino are the only two that make it with Cable, and that's it. But and also one of the best, not even superhero cameos, best cameos I've ever seen in my life is Vanisher being Brad Pitt, and you see Brad
Yeah,
Pitt on screen for a second, two
yeah. One
seconds,
second. Yeah.
and I love the story behind that. He called and he said, "I want to be in Deadpool," and there was like other scheduling conflicts and other things that weren't going to allow him to be like really tangibly. But I love
Hmm.
the fact that it's just like, and that's it, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah. For like the past decade, Brad Pitt has just been like the coolest person alive.
yeah,
Like for how like he could be a god on Earth if he wanted to. But like he just seems so chill, and that's why I like him.
I think that's another reason that it's so enjoyable to be in something that you just see people want to be in an enjoyable place in life. It's something in
Yeah,
which like I reviewed Deadpool and Wolverine last week on the ONETA show, and I think Deadpool 3 lacks the same emotional heart that 1 and 2 have in spades. And yet, because I just like all the people in it and I love the vibe of the movie that they created, in which it was just all friends that just got together and they're like, can we just have fun and make cool shit together? I'm like, you know what? Sometimes it's okay to just go to the movie
yeah.
and just be like, you know what? Wolverine's claws are really cool. Deadpool's really
Hmm.
cool. They're playing in a universe I love. Fuck it. Let's just have fun with it.
Yeah.
I
And
enjoy
Ryan
that.
Reynolds is like top five casting for superheroes. Like in terms of character to actor.
What's insane is that could it be argued that Fox possibly has some of the best casting for superheroes ever? They just make some of the most ridiculously dumb because you made them dumb movies.
Yeah. Well, it's like they're just scattershot, really. Like sometimes they're great, sometimes they're when they're bad
Right,
too.
like because I look at the MCU. Obviously, Iron Man is cast perfectly.
Hmm.
Captain America, I don't think there's a better casting than Chris Evans as Captain America.
I'm just gonna say I think someone else could have done it.
Well, that's like
Like
saying
that's
someone else could have done Iron Man. I just think
no,
Robert Downey Jr.
but that's
perfect for it.
the way I was looking at it is, can I picture someone else easily in that role? And Robert Downey Jr. It's hard to picture anyone replacing him.
Could have been Tom Cruise. Do you know that?
That would that would not have worked.
That's what they
Yeah,
wanted.
I know.
And apparently
I
that
can.
might be in the works again for a variant. They might want to try to get a Tony Stark variant that's Tom Cruise.
I think it would work as a one-off.
Yeah, for funsies. Fuck yeah. Um, but Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine are so good. And then you go to
Mhm.
the level of then you get like, oh, that must be it. And you're like, no, Patrick Stewart as Professor X is perfect. Ian McKellen as Magneto is perfect. Like, even Halle
Yeah, but
Berry as Storm works really well. And you're like,
Yeah, they are consistent with casting. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender as well.
Yep. When
I
she's
mean, they reboot the entire franchise
yeah, I
and do
mean,
it well.
and I'll say this: when she's motivated, Jennifer Lawrence is a good casting in
Yeah,
those first two movies. It's when you get to Apocalypse and she stops caring, and
yeah.
then you get to
Well, you
Dark
can,
Phoenix and she fucking couldn't care less.
yeah. Well, it's clear in Apocalypse that she's just there for the paycheck.
Yeah, she's just not trying. And
Yeah,
but you're seeing good casting, so it's insane to think about. But um, Deadpool 2 is just such a fun raucous romp of can we just have fun, but can we tell something that's really worthwhile? And I like the fact that they elevate. I always love the fact that Deadpool tries to elevate characters that comic book fans like, love, or would love to see more of, and they're willing to try it. Like Domino's a character that I didn't think anyone would ever try. Where even if before I saw Zazie Beetz as Domino, if someone asked me, "Hey, would you ever try Domino in a movie?" I would say absolutely not. No, we're not touching that. Because how do you make
yeah,
that tangible? How do you make that worthwhile? But when you have it in a comedy movie where you can just
yeah,
make it bullshit and just by luck everything works for her.
yeah. That is a great way for her to fit in.
Yeah.
Is through comedy. So yeah, it does really work well.
Because can you argue Domino in Infinity War?
No.
Because you have Domino and then she doesn't get dusted because she's lucky, or Thanos doesn't win because she's lucky, or
Yeah.
like what's the level that we're going for?
Well, yeah, I guess it is kind of just she. Yeah, her character would not work well within a larger universe.
And so it's like, what do you do? I would love to see her, but you just have to be very smart about her usage now. But I think Deadpool 2 is great, and also Brolin back to back with Thanos and Cable, so good,
Yeah, you
so
got the
good.
Goonies, Josh Brolin.
Goddamn right, Goonies, Josh Brolin. But we're to our top half now. What is your number
All right.
five?
Number 5, Batman Begins.
Shockingly not on my list.
Wow,
Yep, I tried
that is
to.
a big surprise.
Um, so, without any shock to people who have listened to me, Batman has a healthy presence on my list. However, I tried to tailor it so it wasn't just Batman. Because there is a huge part of me that could just fill more than half this list with Batman movies and be completely content and fine with it.
Yeah, I watched this like a couple months ago, and I was like, why do I like this movie so much?
Because
I
it's
couldn't really.
fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Nolan is always going to be a good storyteller,
It's the best modern
like
storyteller we have in movies.
easily, because you can't think of one of his movies that are actually like bad. When he makes a movie that doesn't really work, it's just kind of like mediocre. And if that's your worst,
And also, what movie does he have that you would even consider mediocre?
Tenet.
I don't think that's a mediocre movie. I think it's a good movie. It's a mediocre Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah, that might be it. I had really high expectations for it though, so
I
that's
think
why.
that's part of the problem. Is because I
Yeah.
also kind of went in with like a like to the point where I remember when they still released that in summer 2020, and they were like, "No, we're gonna do it," and I was like, I think Christopher Nolan could actually get me in a mask to go to a theater.
Hmm.
I don't know, and I mean I
Yeah.
waited till streaming, but I enjoyed Tenet quite a bit, but it's mediocre for it's probably the it's not even fair to say worst. It's least best. It's the least best
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan movie since Batman Begins. Because I haven't
Yeah.
seen Memento and I haven't seen what's his other one, Insomnia. I haven't seen those two.
Insomnia, and I think he also has. I think it's called Following. It's like his first movie. It's really low budget.
Okay,
I,
love that shit.
I've seen that. I just rewatched Memento a couple. It wasn't actually that long ago. A couple weeks ago. It didn't work for me as well on a rewatch,
Sure.
but I mean that's typical because it's there's a twist, so it's
Yeah, twist
Obviously,
end.
not going to work as well.
Yeah, you can't do that as well. But
Yeah.
Batman Begins though. This is
Oh,
this is
well,
where Christopher Nolan fucking comes to play.
here's probably the biggest question about this. Does the Christian Bale Batman voice work for you?
In Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, yes.
Okay, I would agree. It never bothered me, not for a second.
It it still doesn't bother me, but I can understand why in The Dark Knight Rises it does bother people. Whereas
Well,
I don't agree that it should bother anybody in Batman Begins to The Dark Knight.
hmm yeah, they don't go overboard with it at all.
No, and the only time you can even think he might, it's in pure things of anger where you're like, makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and Christian Bale is a great Batman.
he's a great Batman. Um, again, the only thing about Batman movies that sucks is I get super nitpicky. Um, I'm not. He's great at portraying the iteration of Bruce Wayne they created. I just wish it wasn't that iteration of Bruce Wayne. I wish he was a little bit more just outwardly kind and
Well,
bumbling
the
idiot versus, or like the kind of playboy that you kind of go, there's no goddamn way he could be it. Where they went the other way, where he doesn't care, which is why people would believe Bruce Wayne could never be Batman.
yeah, he's very apathetic in those movies.
Where I think it's best, I truly do believe some of the comic books or Batman the Animated Series is probably the best iteration of Bruce, where he's very caring. You can see
Mm.
he gives a shit about humanity, but the way he does it and the way he portrays Bruce
Well,
outwardly to the public is very nice. He has his flash as a playboy, but like he's just so kind to be kind, and he's just so like in the shadows. I don't get involved. That
yeah.
you're like, okay, that Bruce Wayne could make sense.
Well, I think that's why Batman Begins works so well for me. Is like, it's not an origin story of Batman, really. It's pretty much an origin story of how Bruce thinks
Yeah.
and why he created Batman.
Hmm.
Because like half the movie, he's not Batman. He's just Bruce.
Well, that's the key.
Like,
You have to care about Bruce in this movie. You can't just care
yeah.
about Batman.
I love all the. Where are they? Japan.
Rough. They're in. I think they're in the Himalayas, so they're in like Tibet, Nepal, that
Okay.
area.
That I love all those sequences. Liam Neeson's great.
Is there even a bad scene in Batman Begins?
I wouldn't say there's a bad scene, but Katie Holmes doesn't work for me that well. So, but like in terms of the story, no, I don't think so.
That's how good this movie is. I've never seen Katie Holmes in anything except this, except a few
Mm.
random clips from Watch Mojo from Dawson's Creek. And she works in this movie for me. Everything
Yeah.
works in this movie, and it is such a well told, logical story as to
Well,
why
that
step to step to step to step to step to step it works.
yeah, that's like the biggest argument against Nolan is that he is so logical to a point where like Inception really isn't that dreamlike when you really think about it, but it because it has to follow rules
Yep.
that he sets up. But all that stuff works for me in this movie and The Dark Knight.
Right. And trust me, I'm sure that makes an appearance later.
Yeah.
But um, to focus on Batman Begins, I don't know if there's a better origin story movie out there. It is. It's the kind of thing that once you tell it, no one has to ever tell it again because they
Yeah.
get it. Where even if you have slight detail alterations, you don't need to really go into it. It's something that we even have to think about when we did Batman versus Superman, the Fix It episode we just did, where it's like Batman Begins came out 11 years before that movie came out. Do you really need to go into 30 minutes of why Batman is Batman? No. Everybody
Yeah.
including our grandmother knows why Batman became Batman. And our grandmother has zero clue about pop culture at all. And she could
Yeah.
still tell
Well,
you
we should
this is
also
why Batman is Batman.
yeah, we should also mention how like Batman was thought of really low. Like he was pretty much a joke almost at that point because Batman and Robin.
Cinematically, yes. Like he was on his ass. They Warner Brothers, in a classic sense of studio not taking care of something and going for cash cow. Like you look at the recipe for Batman and Robin, it is a recipe for disaster before even a word is written on the
Yeah.
page. Oh,
Yes.
we started a new franchise. It kind of we rebooted a franchise, sort of, but not sort of, but really you did. Oh, and we're gonna do, you know, and we're gonna give more creative freedom to somebody who, with creative freedom, goes in directions that don't really work with the character, and we're gonna cast all these characters that don't really make sense in our world, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this. Oh, and we're gonna make the movie toyetic because we're greedy and we want toys. We don't want to worry
Yeah.
about the quality of the movie, and we're only gonna give you 2 years instead of 3 years to do this. And you're like, who thought this was a good idea? That's where
Yeah.
I'm glad you pointed that out. That's where Batman was to a moviegoer. Was the last time they saw
Hmm.
Batman? It was in Batman and Robin, and George Clooney's Batman that does not work.
Yeah. Think of that jump from George Clooney as Batman to Chris.
And again, I love George Clooney's Bruce Wayne. I really do. I
Well, it's
just
because Bruce Wayne is pretty much just George Clooney.
There you go. But that is the worst rendition ever of a
Yeah.
character of that magnitude on screen in a way that they do not belong like that.
Yeah. I think what I like about Batman Begins is you're always seeing the morals of Batman. In this one, you're really seeing the morals of Bruce. There's a lot more focus on Bruce, which that works for me.
I think this one is what I like is the balancing act where does Bruce end and Batman begin? No pun intended.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting
Where
it.
does Batman
Yeah.
end and Bruce begin? Where is the separation? Um,
Hmm.
I really like the fact that this one does a good dichotomy mix where I am of the opinion the best way I think I've ever understood a dichotomy of characters is when you look at Superman and Clark Kent. Clark Kent is the real person, Superman is the mask.
Hmm.
That's what you have. You have to get people to care about Clark because they'll care about
Yeah.
Superman because he is Clark Kent.
Hmm.
When you look at Batman and Bruce Wayne, Batman is the real person.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne is the mask. And I think that's where here it works so well as you're constantly asking yourself, where does one end and the other begin? And it's such a great way to make tangible things in Batman's universe that could be hard to digest, especially at this time where you just got, you know, Plant Lady and Freezy Block Man, and you're just like, fuck. Like,
Yeah. Think of think of Batman and Robin's cast, and then compare it to Batman Begins, where you get like the top actors. You get Cillian Murphy first off, who as a villain, Liam Neeson
who was supposed to be Batman. Or I shouldn't say supposed to be Batman. He auditioned to be Batman.
auditioned. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You get Michael Caine. You get Liam Neeson. You get
Morgan Freeman.
uh, yeah, Morgan Freeman, Gary Oldman. Like every person in it is great.
Uh, Ken Watanabe, another great actor in this
Oh.
as well. Um, Rutger Hauer comes back out like from movie Dead. He comes out of like
Yeah.
movie fucking Graveyard and comes back to be a great part of this film. The casting on this is so good.
Oh, and I just looked. Tom Wilkinson. I
Yep,
like him in that movie a
Tom
lot too.
Wilkinson's also phenomenal. Like that's one of those things that when you look at how deep that roster is, that's like a kind of Super Bowl roster where there's no outright like star that steals the team
Yeah.
away, but this team is so deep that you're like, there's no way someone could beat this team. That's what
Yeah.
the Dark Knight trilogy really looks like. Um, is just such a deep roster of extremely talented actors that are all leading men and women, but
Hmm.
they play such a significant role to making that movie so good.
Yeah.
It is probably one of the best origins, if not the best origin story that's out there in comic book movies. Um, you know, it's so good. Batman Begins is so good. Uh, we're gonna stay within Batman for my number five, but I'm going back to Michael Keaton days. Batman Returns is my number five. This is a movie that
Not on my list.
Batman Returns is, I think, legitimately one of my top five favorite movies of all time, or top 10. Uh,
It just doesn't work for me that well.
you know me. I love a Tim Burton movie. I love a Tim Burton
Yeah.
zaniness movie.
I I like a lot of early Tim Burton stuff, but yeah, his Batman's just like I really like the production design. I think probably those two movies in terms of production design is the best Batman can get.
Hmm.
But yeah, something about them just it's
Tim,
almost like they're almost boring in a way to me.
that's hurtful. Um, but if
I
that's
mean,
if that's what it is to you, it's what it is to you.
but it's been a long time since I've seen them.
Batman Returns, A, is one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time. Um, starts off in a really bold move with a villain origin story, not a hero origin story, which is really unique and interesting.
Yeah,
Um, does every choice makes with characters work for everybody? Absolutely not. Um, but yet the way he does it makes it work. It's just the thing I really like about it is the quality is different, the approach is incredibly different. I'm not comparing that thing, but both of these iterations of Batman are different from what I believe Batman should be, in which this goes way into the like zaniness of like
yeah,
crazy dark that I absolutely adore, but like how can we make real world things and just explode into creativity, where Batman begins through The Dark Knight Rises is far too grounded in reality, and it doesn't let
yeah.
Batman play with some of the characters that I think Batman does best with.
When when did the animated series begin? Because that
92.
seems like that seems like a great companion to those.
That's the thing. If you ask a Batman fan, the vast majority of people are going to tell you the best iteration of Batman ever created is Batman the Animated Series. Um, you just don't get to go as deep in some of the things that Batman would be dealing with in the animated
Mhm.
series for obvious reasons. People forget
Yeah,
Batman the Animated Series was so good and Batman was so fucking popular at that time. That show debuted in prime time. It didn't debut as a
wow.
Saturday morning cartoon. It debuted in prime time because Batman was that fucking popular.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
It didn't have it didn't do enough to capture the adult audience. I think it could work today. But or it could be streaming world's number one kind of thing on a
Hmm.
streaming platform. But back in like old clunky 80s to 90s television where it's like
Where
these are our headliners on prime time.
yeah,
I don't think Batman really works in that as an
well,
animated series.
also I don't know when it began, but there probably were very few channels.
You were getting to the dawn of cable in terms of like mass
Yeah,
appeal of cable. It was 92. You were still really starting to get cable towards the majority of the population at the end of the 80s, early 90s, and by the mid 90s like almost everybody has cable. Um by that time you're choosing not to have cable versus like you can't have cable kind of thing. Uh,
yeah,
but 92 in Batman Returns, I think is a picture perfect Bruce Wayne. I adore the thing I've always heard about Michael Keaton's Batman that I think is so accurate. When you look at Michael Keaton, What about him says Batman? Just Michael Keaton, the man, and the way he's
Nothing.
portrayed in the
Yeah,
movies.
nothing.
Nothing. But the way he puts that suit on and the way he portrays Batman while in the suit, you believe he could do this because then you can see the transformation of him in public, Bruce Wayne, to the second he puts the makeup on to go and put the mask on. You can see how the eyes are haunted and you can see the emotionality behind everything that he's doing to where you believe he could be Batman. And it's just so powerful to see that, and it really reinforces one of the core tenets of Batman, which is just I am one person, I can make a difference. That's
Mm.
You believe Michael Keaton's Batman could do it. But I really love the fact that that movie is centered around two villains. It's not really centered around Batman. It's more of what Batman would actually have
Yeah,
to be.
that's true.
Bad shit happens. I go fix it, and I'm just constantly in that cycle. And eventually, I have to find a way to end that cycle temporarily. And you can't talk
Yeah,
about the
good
brilliance of
cast.
the movie. Good casting is correct.
Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer,
That was the next piece I was
Christopher
getting to.
Walken, Danny DeVito. Yeah,
Well, also like
they're all great.
you still have Michael Goff, Pat Hingle, which are great character actors in this. Um,
Mhm.
just, I mean, Pee Wee, he's making a. Paul Rubens makes an appearance in this film, which is really interesting and fun. He's Penguin's
I
dad.
didn't know that.
He's the Penguin's dad in that opening
Oh,
sequence. He's hidden really well with the mustache and the monocle and shit, so people don't immediately go, "Oh, it's Pee Wee." But when you're paying attention, you're like, "Oh shit, I see you,
yeah.
motherfucker." Um, but it's a great way to. I don't think there's a more interesting version of Gotham than Tim Burton's Gotham in Batman Returns. The Art Deco style, to me, when I visualize Batman and I visualize Gotham City, that's the Gotham City I see. Just like chaotic, beautiful, but run down in parts. Doesn't really make sense, which is why this character that's all about order and making the world make sense works so well in that realm because the rest of the world around him doesn't. So he has to use it to his
Hmm.
advantage. I also think wintertime, Christmas time is a perfect place for Batman to be in because
That's
when
also
you have more nighttime, you have more
that's
darkness.
also yeah, that's also something that superheroes generally don't explore at all. Is like different times of the year.
Yeah.
It's always just perfect summer.
And that's the thing that I can't stand about a lot of modern movies and a lot of or just movies in general is to the second you see snow or the second you see leaves turning, it has to be a Halloween movie or a fall movie or it has to be a this movie or a Christmas movie, and it doesn't. This movie takes place at Christmas and it plays with those tones a little bit, but it's not a Christmas movie. It's a Batman movie. It just happens to be at Christmas time.
Yeah, I was now that I'm thinking about it, I think those two Burton Batman movies probably have the best atmosphere in terms of superhero movies because
Until
they actually.
until the Batman, I would say it's the best atmosphere
Uh,
of Batman. I think the best because there's a paranoia in the Batman and a
mhm.
seedy undertone in Matt Reeves' Batman that is hard to be topped. But again, it's kind of pick your poison because I
Yeah,
think both work so well. And I will say this,
yeah,
even though it's the start of the downfall of the franchise, I do think Batman and Robin does set up a fun atmosphere for Gotham. It's just far more like living in cities that have rundown sections to them or having lived in cities with rundown sections to them. When you see like party nightlife light and bright in this city that's very greedy and like gritty and seedy, you can see that working well if you've lived it because you can kind of see like
hmm,
no, even in quote the hood, even in the neighborhoods that everyone's like, don't go to that neighborhood. You can still see light and bright and fun from time to time. You just have to be really smart about it. Um, but the atmosphere of those movies is so good, and I just love the sensibility of Batman Returns. I think it just needs to be toned down, maybe one tiny notch, and then it's pretty much perfection for me as a fan of Batman. I just wish he wasn't strapping bombs to clowns. Otherwise, we're good. Uh,
Yeah, I think I might rewatch those two come Halloween.
it Batman '89 is hard because it still feels old. Where one thing I've always said about Batman Returns is this: all three principal players are phenomenal, and Michelle Pfeiffer steals the show. I'm glad you brought her up. I was going to bring it up,
Yeah,
and then you asked me about the atmosphere. Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman defines the character for many people. Like that's how good that performance is, which is insane because it's
Mhm.
not a super accurate representation of the character, and yet her performance is so powerful that it defines the character for people.
Well, that character is so well like explored
Mm-hmm.
because normally you don't get that much depth in
A villain.
a character in a superhero movie.
Uh huh.
Yeah, especially a villain. I would say like arguably the closest you get is probably Thanos.
Yep.
Like there's not that many that actually explore the character as much as they do with
Like
Catwoman.
you're looking at a short list of, and Penguin gets a good amount of time too. But you're
Yeah.
looking at like you're talking Magneto in First Class. You're talking Thanos in Infinity War. You're talking, oh god, like what are some other really great?
Heath
I mean,
Ledger's
like
Joker.
Heath Ledger's Joker, maybe Killmonger in Black Panther. Like we're talking rarefied air
Mm,
of how well we understand a villain. A villain needs to believe A, that they're
yeah.
doing something that is right, or they just have to be so outwardly themselves that it works. Number one. And number two, you have to understand why they're doing it. And you understand it with both of these characters. Penguin's a little bit more of a stretch,
Mm,
but Catwoman specifically, you understand to a T why she's doing what she's doing, and the things that you question, the character is also questioning, which I love. And I just love the tortured aspect to all three of them. It's such a great, triumvirate of like, what are we doing? How do we react in the world? Um, it's such a well set up world. And I think Batman Returns holds up so much better than the original '89 Batman because it's its own thing that lives in its own kind of place. Um,
yeah.
and Chef's Kiss, love that fucking movie. It pained me because I'm not gonna lie, there was a if we're actually looking at reality, my top three all would have been Batman, but I switched it up just to make sure my top three weren't just Batman, Batman, Batman. So we had a little bit more
Hey,
variety to
hey,
talk
if
about.
that's what you like, that's what you like.
Yeah, they work for me, man.
Okay. My number four is X2, X-Men United. I just
Interesting.
rewatched it. This week I just rewatched it.
Okay,
It's great. I love the opening with Nightcrawler. Like
that's a
in
great
terms of
sequence. Great sequence.
yeah, in terms of action sequences, it's top notch for a superhero movie, and that's also a great way to introduce the character because you're setting up Nightcrawler, who is a new character. You're setting up like he's killing or attempting to kill the president,
Mm-hmm.
which is in actuality Stryker staging that so he can work against mutants more. And then you also set up the fact that he's kind of like mind controlled by Stryker.
Yeah, you set up so many
It's
plot
great.
points of that film. You set up the major
Yeah.
sequencing. You set up great character work in that film, and you understand. I think X2 does the best job of any X-Men movie of understanding why humans could hate or fear mutants. Like that's something I think that the X-Men, I think something that holds the
Yeah.
X-Men franchise back in general, just as a concept, especially in today's world where our culture wars are more about the acceptance of the other versus the like I think X-Men could speak to this now, but it can't be about race as much. Although that's still
Yeah,
obviously a
there's like
problem, but the culture wars really are about gender identity, sexual
yeah.
identity, nation of origin
Well,
kind of
there's
thing.
definitely it definitely is like in its time because it's hinting around like how accepting should we be of gay people and stuff like that. Because literally in the scene with Iceman's parents, the mom says,
But you
"Well,
should just try
wait,
not to
what?
be a mutant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Have you tried not?"
Yeah.
It's just like that's like the most cliche of cliches for gay people.
Yep.
But I think the X Men is a good way of exploring those bigger topics.
Well, I think this is where the X Men has done so well. One thing I've always struggled with, and granted, I've grown up with the X Men. I grew up with the '92 series, as did you. I just don't think you got as much of it because you're 2 years younger than I was, or I am.
Yeah.
Is I don't think the whole humans hating mutant thing works unless you do because in a larger context because of this. How can you accept Captain America but not accept the vast majority of mutants that
Hmm.
have superpowers but are just normal people with superpowers? Where it's
Yeah.
it's it's a little different when you have like I could understand why people could be really freaked out about Mystique. She could be anybody. It plays on paranoia and she can just change at a
Yeah.
dime. But then when you look at what Mystique actually looks like in her base form, it's uncanny. It doesn't
Yeah.
compute to the human brain.
When, when you rewatch those movies, you really realize like how important Mystique is to those that cinematic universe.
Yes. And
Like she's a central character in every single one.
and it makes zero sense because not saying Mystique doesn't play a role in X-Men or a larger role in the X-Men comics or even the show, but Mystique is not that important in the comics. Like she's cool, she's interesting.
I think they actually explore her character pretty well within the first three
Yeah.
movies. Like for a sidekick villain, it's pretty impressive actually.
Yeah. No, I think X2 does the best of setting the paranoia point. Like that's one of the things is like I don't get why humans would be afraid of mutants in that world. That's a world that has
Yeah,
I get why
unless they're Magneto and they're trying to kill people.
right, like I would get why you'd hate Magneto. I don't
Yeah,
understand why you'd just be like, "Well, you're a mutant too." It's like
especially someone like Professor X.
yeah, it's like well, I have no problem if you say, "Well, it's kind of crazy." Sure. But like Cyclops, it's like he's wearing fucking glasses. Who gives a shit? Like
Yeah,
it's the same deal as like, how can you trust a cop with a gun and then say, like, oh no, it's totally fine. I accept that as life threatening that I can accept. But if a bad
hmm
cop exists, you don't immediately say, all cops are evil. Now, granted, a lot of people would say that, and there's part of me
yeah,
that even feels that way, but I get it. But, like, it's the same thing. Like, soldier with a gun on your team, you don't immediately think, like, that person sucks. We need to get rid of them. You just kind of go, okay. I don't understand how like you can live in a world like I get why people would be afraid of the Hulk. I don't get why people would be afraid of Rogue. I don't get it. I don't understand why they'd be afraid of
well,
like Storm.
it,
Storm makes sense. Bitch can control the world with whether she wants to.
yeah,
Makes total sense. But I don't like how outwardly it's just hate mutants. Why? Because they're mutants. It's like I get it.
yeah,
It was the
but
time and it was the racism.
yeah,
It was the racism tropes that they were exploring. Not tropes, but
yeah,
themes that they were exploring. Um, I think this does the best of understanding why mutants could be seen as the other. I think that's the best part about X2 from a larger
yeah. I
thematic
think
sense.
I think they kind of felt obligated almost to have like a message to it like that because it's so like deeply
Rooted in the origin of the comic. Yeah.
yeah, it's so deeply rooted in like the civil rights stuff. So it kind of makes sense to me, but it's not like that big of a focus. That's why I like it.
No, I know. It's I can understand it. I still think it's a strong point. It's more so like a
Hmm.
problem with the franchise, not a problem with the movie. Because the movie does a
Yeah,
good job of showcasing why that would matter. By the
yeah,
time you get to Logan and people are like, "We hate mutants," I'd be like, "Fuck off! You've seen the X-Men save your world thousands of times over. If you don't like mutants by that
yeah,
point, you're just a racist prick. Go fuck
yeah, pretty
yourself."
much.
Like you're not like a normal person with like, "Oh, I have concerns." It's like, "No, you're just a prick." Whereas
Yeah,
like here I kind of get it. Stryker's a really good villain. I do enjoy
I
that.
I think he's the best villain in terms of X Men. I think he's better than Magneto as a villain because Magneto
I
is
could
like
see it.
he's such a gray area that it's like I kind of root for Magneto at times,
Yeah.
but yeah, but Stryker's just like a villain. That's it. He is not a good guy.
Right, and he's taking his personal trauma out on the world, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
Um, I do like the I like the new mutants that we get in this. I wish we got a few more because I think this would have been a great way to do
yeah,
it. Is you could have shown Stryker experimenting on them and free them a little bit
yeah.
more.
That could have
Uh,
worked.
like the I think the thing I struggle with in the early this is not fair because this is inherently comic book fan of my time. I don't think there's a better X-Men team than the Jim Lee era that we see in X-Men 92. I don't think there's a better X-Men team because it's so colorful, but yet they all play off each other so well. So when you get this team and there's no Beast, there's no Colossus, there's no uh, there's like to me I never understood why Jubilee wasn't even in these movies. Not because I think Jubilee's like the best, but you're inherently dealing with a lot of younger people around you all the
Yeah,
time. And the fact that like they don't even have Jubilee as like a hey, she could be useful.
yeah. Well,
Like you
and
just had 5 years of great animation to get your audience ready for Jubilee.
yeah,
Use it. Take advantage of it.
and the sequence where they break into the X Mansion,
Yeah.
that's like a really easy way to set up another character,
Right, and
another student.
I think they did a great job with Bobby and Iceman. I think Pyro is a really good addition to show the darker sides of feeling alone and hated, and so you find
Hmm.
anybody that will accept you, which it makes perfect sense as to why he goes with Magneto. Um, I really enjoy that. I think Rogue's done really well in this movie. Um, yeah, X2 is so good. It's a great movie.
Yeah,
Um, and to see where X-Men went after this is such a shame because
yeah. Well,
they took what was really good in the first movie, amped it up, did it even better in the second one, and even the logic that they had for not including Nightcrawler in the third movie, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
yeah. I mean, because like everyone loves Nightcrawler. I've never met someone who's like, I don't like him.
No,
But
he's a phenomenal character, and also like
and
even
it's
if
just fun to watch him.
it's so fun to watch. Plus, he brings a lot of what's funny about Nightcrawlers being so intangibly just doesn't work for people. Blue
Like,
skin, pointy
like
ears,
yeah,
yellow eyes,
non-human.
just non-human, and yet he's one of the most human characters there are
Yeah.
because he just has this unending faith that so many people possess or wish to possess, and you know it's earnest and it's just something
Hmm.
that could help people connect. And that's where I'm just like,
Yeah.
even the
And
character works to help your audience. What are you
yeah.
doing?
And I think he has the best moment in the movie where the plane gets attacked and Rogue goes flying out of the giant hole,
Uh-huh.
and then he teleports and then teleports back into the ship.
Yeah.
I think that's the best moment. It's great.
It Nightcrawler's such a good addition, and the fact that they didn't keep going with that is a shame. And that's where I just kind of go. what are we doing here, folks? But X2 by itself is a tremendous movie. That was your number four, correct?
Yep.
Let's talk Endgame now, baby. Number four, Avengers
Okay.
Endgame.
So why do you like it more than Infinity War? I guess is the question.
It's the payoff. It's the payoff.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I do actually think it's like a really viewing, and it is fun to watch. It just I don't think it benefits that much from rewatches for me.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. I think that
But it's really fun. But
I don't watch Avengers Endgame end to end in a rewatch.
yeah,
I think
that
that's a good point on your part of the rewatchability of it is when I rewatch Endgame, I very much piece to piece it. Or
yeah.
I tune out for if I put it on just to put it on. I will do something. I'll do graphics for the shows, or
Mhm.
I'll draw Pokemon for the other shows that I need to do, or whatever I'm doing. It's on, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, it's that scene. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah, the funny thing is like in terms of a universe, it's the most consequential,
yeah.
but for me it doesn't feel that way that much.
I don't understand that one on your part, but if that's how
I
it
I
makes you
think it's
feel,
because I think it's because they built it up as this could be the ending of like this storyline. You know what I'm talking about? Like the heroes have to win in the end.
yeah, you know they have to win, and it's one of those of I would say this if I'm gonna pick like I'll do some positives and then I'll play that game with you a little bit.
Yeah, I am not that negative on this movie. I actually
Yeah,
really like it.
yeah. No, I think it's important to talk Avengers Endgame that it's not perfect, but I think this is where comic book movies are always supposed to go. Is you're building and so many characters are paid off in this movie.
Hmm.
So many arcs. I know I do it so often, and I do apologize to people who are not wrestling fans. This is WrestleMania. This is the Super Bowl. This is a year of anticipation. This is a year of all the stories and all the lives and everything going to a point and finally getting their payoff where something good or the end has to happen.
Yeah,
Um, I don't always. I actually have a real beef with one of the endings in this movie, which is crazy for someone who loves this movie as much as I do. But that's more of an overall choice of the cinematic universe versus the movie itself. Because
yeah.
I think it's a really smart choice in the movie, the ending I'm
I
talking
think
about. But
I think the most clever thing they do is it could easily become like just a jumbled mess of fighting
yep,
at the end, but they actually do really well to make it character moments within the fighting,
yep,
which I really do appreciate because yeah, it could easily turn into like a transform
yep,
where it's just action.
right. And yay, we still get to watch two Transformers movies for the big box office series. Yay. Um, but with Avengers Endgame, what I it's such a highly personal story and you're seeing character growth even through like little moments where Cap swears like he would never swear back in the day and he's just gone through so much shit in life he's just like fuck this like
Yeah.
I,
They're also they're also very good at finding a satisfying ending for most of the characters.
yeah
Like, because I think Captain America's ending is perfect to me.
that's actually the one I hate the most.
Really?
Yep.
Why is that?
I I don't like going backwards. To me that's How I Met Your Mother's ending.
But uh, if you're going to retire the character, that seems more fitting to me, I guess.
So here's the thing, I understand the logic of trying to give him a happy ending. I really do.
Hmm.
Because you have to get him. So here's my issue. This is where I think you start seeing the problems of the MCU versus the problems of the movie. I think that Captain America choosing to go back in time for Peggy is a super negative. But I understand why
Sure.
people really want that to happen and loved that ending, because I also love that ending. It's the reason why I love The Dark Knight Rises and rewatch it a lot more. Because it's easier rewatch than The Dark Knight for me, because it's the tortured hero finally getting the payoff to be able to live his life and get the reward at the end of the day that he deserves. I get it.
Hmm.
It's the same reason why, even though Spectre is a flawed James Bond movie, I love Spectre. Because at the end of it, he finally just goes, fuck that. Why am I doing this shit when there's someone I
Yeah.
love and I can just be with the person I love? I totally get it, and I understand why the audiences want that. I think it speaks to a larger problem. I don't like ever when you go backwards and why. Did you ever watch the finale of How I Met Your Mother?
Hmm.
I just pretend in my mind the last two episodes don't exist, and it ends with him meeting the mother in person at the wedding, and Barney and Robin and Lily and Marshall, all five of them, they go off and live their life the way they want to, and they ride off into the sunset.
Hmm.
I hate the last two episodes because you built this whole thing of character growth, all for him to then just go, I was actually just in love with Robin the whole time. And you're like, okay, so was the relationship with the mom not important?
Yeah.
Or did you secretly love Robin this entire time and then you settled for her? Or whatever. I hate that you start getting like they never played it as though, to me, I thought you already paid Peggy's story off with him in Winter Soldier perfectly. Where
Hmm.
you see Peggy dying and he understands I can't be with you because
Hmm.
I'm now here and you've lived your life and I never got that. And it sucks that we were robbed of that, but it seems like he's coming to terms with that because he's such a good person, and that's fine. And then he gets a piece of Peggy in her niece, and that's a very logical, and Sharon's like his number one love in the comics, or one of his main love interests in the comics. So I'm like, it makes sense that you get the echo of Peggy in Sharon, plus you could then say him going like, I think it makes more logical sense for him to say after everything he's been through, he wouldn't violate the rules of time by changing a timeline and just going there, because then it goes, hold on, so you exist in this timeline now for like 70 years, right? And you don't interject yourself at all. You just retired. And now you're going to relive 70 of the most tumultuous years
Well,
in human
that's the
history.
problem with time travel movies in general.
So I'm just like, I think that violates core tenets of Captain America, where I think it would have been more rewarding for him to say, I need to pass this on and I need to take on a new role that you don't see that much and go live my life. But then, when the world's fucked and you really need Captain America, I'm still here. I think that's just far more worthwhile. It's problematic for an MCU because then everyone's like, well, he's on the shelf, he's on the shelf. Well, it's like, no shit. But
That's I think that's why I like Iron Man and Captain America's ending so much is the finality. Like, there's no bringing them back, or there should be no bringing them back.
have fun with that
Um,
one. There's no way on in this world that you're not going to see at least one of them in that role again.
yeah,
And
I mean, of course,
if they
but
do that, I will be more and more impressed by the day that they
but
have never
like,
done it.
but technically, those characters should be retired, and that's why I enjoy it. Like, I don't. If you're gonna have a finale to a big overarching story, have a couple characters have their. It's the final thing you're ever gonna see them in.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
No, and that's the thing, is that's what I think is great about the movie. It's the overall implications that the universe continues, and
Yeah,
then it's like you're forced to, knowing that you're going to continue your universe, you are forced to then say, make decisions that I think either way are flawed for the character. Where I understand and agree with, you want finality in your characters, but I don't think that's a finality Captain America would
yeah.
do, should do, or belongs with. I think that's just backwards in this. It's like, then what was he doing in Civil War and in Infinity War, where like he's done all this character growth and he's just shown no matter what, I'm here for others. And then in the
Yeah.
end to just go, hey, I've already been warned that if I fuck with time, it gets really nasty. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a super selfish decision and I'm going to go back and live with the love of my life. And I'm just going to skip 60 years of human existence of not being in. It's like, so you're telling me Captain America didn't do shit for 60 years
Hmm.
and time just let it slip? Like, what are we talking about
Yeah.
here? And that's where the bigger implication problems that Endgame creates is not an Endgame problem. It's a post Endgame problem. That's my one
Hmm.
big bitch about it. And I understand a lot of people believe there's plot holes, and I can understand why. Like time travel movies in general, it's hard not to have a plot hole.
It
Um,
doesn't bother me.
yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. I still think the portal scene with Avengers Assemble is one of the most I think you could argue that is the most. I don't know if it is, but I think you could argue that's the most rewarding scene in all of cinema because you have watched 20 plus movies to get to that moment to finally get the payoff of I wanted to see everybody together to fight this big badass motherfucker and we're finally here. I really do believe you could make that argument. I don't know if it's the true thing or not for everybody, but I truly do think you could make that argument.
I think for modern cinema goers, sure, but I'm not going to put it up there with the best of the best moments in movie history.
Well, in terms of satisfying payoff, that's fucking cool to go
I mean,
20 plus movies.
sorry, Lupin's freaking out.
Hi, Lupin. It's good to see you, bud. Is there someone passing your window? Specifically a dog?
It's a dog.
Yep. He does that.
Luke, calm down.
Yeah. That's
There we
almost
go.
that's almost as satisfying as Avengers Endgame. Just because of the funny of it. I like how he's just off screen. He's just slowly getting in screen and off screen with his little.
Yeah,
There he
he's
is.
literally right here.
I know it's great. But I just think I had been living my entire life waiting for Captain America to say those words. Since I was a child, I just wanted to see
Hmm.
that. The only thing that could have made that moment better is seeing Wolverine in that team. And just going like,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
But it's the same thing as to why I'm dying for Justice League to be done. I want to see Batman next to Green Lantern, next to Martian
Hmm.
Manhunter, and Wonder Woman, and Zatanna, and all these wonderful characters of the DC universe. And Avengers Endgame gives you that. And even the moments where you're like, fan service, it's so good that you don't really give a fuck if it's just fan service.
Yeah. The fan service is actually pretty satisfying in that
Yeah.
movie.
Where
Like,
when all the female
none of it-
superheroes get together, it's gratuitous. You can't say it's not.
Oh, 100%.
But is it rewarding as all hell? Absolutely. And it's so much
Yeah.
fun.
Well, also, it's not just like, oh, girl power. It's
Right.
like you've seen these characters and they actually are badasses, so it works.
Right. And you're seeing you're seeing so much build and character through that moment, and it's just a really unifying thing to see. And I do like the. I would have argued if it were me, I probably would have killed off a few more characters. I would. I probably, if I were the one directing things in terms of like direction of the entire MCU, I would have asked my creative team, okay, where are we going? What are we trying to do? Who can we sacrifice? Not necessarily that we want to, but who can we sacrifice? Because
Yeah.
because then I would have been like, okay, anyone who's not on the we have to have list is eligible to die.
Hmm.
Where I
I like
almost
that way of thinking.
it would have hurt me deeply. And I think Iron Man's the right choice in the MCU to go the way of the dodo by self-sacrifice. But in terms of just character self-sacrifice, no one makes more sense to die than Cap.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's true.
and so it's one of those where it's like you want finality, they both go out together. Where it's like or they go out
Well, that's my thing. Is like I like that those two shouldn't come back in the universe.
Right,
Will
and
they? Probably,
well, that's the thing.
but that's outside of.
I will say Chris Evans has stated, I still need time, but I would at least, for the right thing, consider coming back. I find it hard to believe in a Secret Wars where now we're going to get everybody, that there's not a way to get a Captain America. Now, granted,
Yeah.
spoilers for anybody, spoilers. He does make a cameo in Deadpool and Wolverine as the Human Torch. So
Ah,
maybe he's satisfied that appetite. Now he's really like, nah, I'm done. But you cannot make me believe that in any way, shape, or form, especially when Marvel's starting to get up off their ass, but feeling that they need to get off their ass, you cannot tell me they're not going to try to bring back both of them, or at least one of them in that role, because they're already
yeah.
bringing back Robert Downey Jr. and Victor Von Doom, and I find it hard to fucking believe that's not a variant of Tony Stark at this moment. So,
I I agree. That's what I first thought too.
so I'm like, I don't trust you motherfuckers to just let this be. Uh,
Well, we can keep talking about MCU because my number three, Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one.
okay, it's a great movie.
In terms of a movie going experience, I've never been as satisfied as I was Guardians of the Galaxy for the first time.
How when you went to see it for the first time, did you have a packed theater or did you have an early theater?
It
Did
was
you go
like
week 1 or week 2? Because it's a big difference.
it was week one because I was so excited about seeing it. Um, but it was like a really early morning showing, so
Okay.
there was only a few people.
I went opening night Thursday. You remember when they were just doing Thursday night openings now instead of Fridays?
Yeah.
I went Thursday night. First show you could go to for this movie. There were maybe 12 people in that theater with me. Maybe.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun that was at the time where I was really building my Marvel comics knowledge, and I fell in love with Guardians immediately when I started reading the comic. And I was like, "Oh, this is going to be fun." I didn't know the whole depths of Guardians yet, but I'd gotten my first big tastes of it in the comics, and I was like, "This is going to be rewarding." And this Guardians of the Galaxy, I think, is another really important one, like Captain America: Winter Soldier, because it sends a message as to what Marvel can do. This is the first
Hmm.
movie where they just said, "We're going to try some real crazy shit, and you're going to go because it's Marvel." And they were
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, they're definitely not afraid of taking risks in Guardians.
And I remember that first theater, it was me and 12 other real sweaty fucking nerds, and we lost our goddamn minds together, and it was fun as all get out. Guardians of the Galaxy holds the record for the movie I've seen the most in theaters. I saw that movie 5 times in the theater.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what mine was. I think it was
Zero.
Deathly Hollows Part 2, and I think I saw it 7 times.
Holy shit, Dylan.
Well, I'm obsessed with Harry
I know
Potter.
it's Harry
So.
Potter, I get it, but
Um, but the funny thing is, like, I remember some of our friends when it was coming out were like talking shit about it, and after the first time I saw the trailer, I was like convinced. I was like, this is going to be a great movie, and then to have it actually be that is so
which is
satisfying.
so weird because so many people saw that first trailer, or saw, no, I shouldn't say the first trailer. They saw the first like little bits and footage that were kind of leaked, and we're like, this
Yeah,
movie's gonna suck. And
yeah. Well, I mean, technically speaking, it should probably, in terms of like the characters are so out there and so weird.
yeah,
But James Gunn is such a great storyteller.
yes,
Like every single character has a humanity that feels real.
yes.
Even Groot, who barely speaks.
What I love about it is it doesn't hit you over the head, and one could argue there's not enough builds for them actually being willing to sacrifice themselves for the actual galaxy, but it for some reason works. And I think that's
Hmm.
another great thing about that movie. And talk about another, top 10 casting of a character. I'm not saying it's impossible. I find it really hard to see anybody playing Star-Lord except Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
I just can't see that character
And this,
without Chris Pratt.
especially because like this was before all his like weird Christian shit and stuff,
Right.
where he was like so likable as a star, it was like impossible that you wouldn't like
Oh no,
Star Lord.
would you argue in terms of male actors, he's the last great Hollywood come up story where
He's
he
definitely
just
up there.
he just did it right, where he
Maybe
built.
maybe Glenn Powell.
Glenn Powell's doing it right now, and I'm appreciative of it.
Yeah.
But like, to think that he's Parks and Rec, and everyone's like, oh, he's a fun character.
Well, and he was supposed to be like a bit part in Parks and Rec. It
Right.
wasn't like a full character.
Well, again, and then he's so likable and so popular. People love
Yeah.
seeing him that he becomes more relevant. He gets Guardians of the Galaxy and does something that's so in his wheelhouse, but also so different from what he's already doing because like he's just big round guy Andy Dwyer, and
Yeah.
then he turns into chiseled out of stone Star Lord, but still has all his likable traits. And then the next year, he gets Jurassic World, and you're like, Chris Pratt's a star. You can say what you want,
Yeah.
Chris Pratt's a star, and it's certainly something where now it's a bit tough in the social media age with Chris Pratt, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I still am excited when I see Chris Pratt's stuff because I'm gonna usually end up liking it.
Yeah. I'm usually pretty good at like separating the art from the artist,
Yes.
but like some things are kind of strange, I guess I would say.
He's in that weird middle ground of like, he's a crazy Christian type of guy, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's got some weird beliefs that I don't really chive into, but he doesn't really like violate any of my big rules where I'm like,
Yeah.
absolutely not, absolutely not,
Yeah,
absolutely
but
not.
he's not a bad person. He just has strange beliefs. Yeah.
Right. Like, and so it's still fine. And like, I like him in Mario. I like him in a lot of other stuff. I'm
Mm.
like, all right, that's fine. But
Yeah.
this is a star maker performance for an entire
Yeah.
cast,
Well,
which is also insane.
I think Zoe Saldana is the most underrated actress in the past 20. Like when you watch those Avatar movies, the performance she's giving is amazing.
She is the heart and soul of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like the movie would not work without her
No.
because it's so out there, but and in this too, I mean she has green skin, I guess. That could be off-putting, but she's great in this. I love her character. My favorite female superhero, as I said.
Which is so crazy for me to think that. But are you talking about like just cinema or comics and like all characters are
Oh no,
available?
no, cinema.
Okay, I was gonna say like that's crazy. I get why, but and it's not to shit on her. It's just like so few people are gonna be like, that's my number one is Gamora.
Yeah.
Because I like
Well,
I prefer Nebula
I
to
also,
Gamora. So
I also really like the Star Lord Gamora relationship.
yeah,
A lot of a lot of times superhero movies, the like love story aspect doesn't work for me that much
yeah.
because it's always like a secondary thing. But I actually really like their relationship,
I
especially because at the beginning I love how all the characters fucking hate each other, and then you get to the awesome prison sequence.
Oh yeah, it's a great sequence. I visually this movie's so interesting. I think the weakest aspect
Yeah,
I think the weakest aspect is its villain that's underdone.
yeah,
Which sucks because I think Lee Pace is such a good character actor.
yeah. I
Um,
think he could have been good.
I mean, he's my favorite part of the Hobbit trilogy. Him and uh, Richard Armitage as Thorin. They're my two favorite
Yeah,
parts of that movie. He takes a bit character. That's the thing that is good about expanding upon the Hobbit universe. he takes a character that's in like 4 lines of token lore, who has no
Hmm.
real personality. There's not much to him. It's just Thranduil, King of the Elves. And he's fucking awesome in those movies. And I adore, and like,
Yeah.
Thranduil is one of my favorite characters in all of Token lore because of that performance. And that's where I look at um Guardians of the Galaxy and I'm like, Ronan's really cool. I want to like Ronan more.
Hmm.
And there's just something's holding it back.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned style though, because in terms of style, Guardians is my favorite in the MCU because it
Right.
actually has a very distinct look to it.
It has a distinct look to it. I think you're starting to. I think that's where Phase 2 is just so important in Marvel because they start trying to make sure everything has a little bit more of a unique feel.
Hmm.
And now with Disney Plus,
Yeah,
a lot of stuff feels homogenous and not like it
because
has a feel to itself.
yeah, like we said before with Winter Soldier, this is like the space opera of the superhero genre.
Right. And Winter Soldier has its own kind of style. It's getting there. It's still
Hmm.
Marvel, but it has a little bit something. There's something a
Yeah,
little different.
like the because I think the ugliest style in the MCU is Joss Whedon's Avengers.
Wow.
I like in terms of like atmosphere and style, I think that it has none.
Fair.
It's so bland. And then you get James Gunn doing like crazy things with Guardians in all three movies.
Oh, you mean going from Joss Whedon's helicarrier that is big plane in sky to
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the head of a celestial and explain what a
Yeah.
celestial is to you and create an entire space colony out of a giant space being's brain. Yeah, it's fucking cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
I just love like it's all like neon.
yes,
It's awesome. It looks so cool.
it feels otherworldly, and yet there's a tangibility to it in which you feel you could grasp it, touch it, and understand it, which I do
Yeah.
think is very very cool. Guardians was a potential for my list. I did not have Guardians on my list. I almost put Guardians of the Galaxy 2 on my list actually, but that's a specific father issue speak to me quite a bit for
Uh,
obvious reasons that you know that the
okay.
audience does not need to know. But that also plus I do like the Guardians 2 is where it starts to feel very tangible where they really do love each other. Where Guardians
Hmm.
1 when they kind of are all buddy buddy at the end and they all really love each other at the end, I'm kind of like, yes, it's earned, but I don't think it's that
Yeah.
earned yet.
Also, we have to mention Dave Batista's like the MVP, the secret MVP of
That is a career maker. Dave
yeah.
Batista shows up in Guardians of the Galaxy pretty much fresh off of becoming a WWE superstar, where that is the only
Hmm.
thing he's known for. I think he had technically a couple bit pieces that no one really paid attention to beforehand. He lands Guardians of the Galaxy, and everyone's like Dave Batista, and even I like. I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, and I was never a huge Batista fan. So when they're like Batista's Drax the Destroyer, I was like,
Yeah.
"What the like?" I'm the target audience that thinks that'd be a good idea, and I'm like, "That's a
Mhm.
stupid ass idea." And
Yeah.
yet the way they portray Drax,
Exactly. It's very smart.
it's so smart, and I love the fact. To me, this is another reason why I Guardians of the Galaxy is low key one of the best unknown casts ever
Hmm.
because Zoe Saldana's biggest role to this point is in alien
Avatar.
skin in Avatar.
Yeah.
So she's not super known to the worldwide audience at this point
Yeah.
through her face alone, right?
You could argue that she still isn't.
She's yeah, it's crazy how she's still not because she just plays these otherworldly characters. Chris
Yeah.
Chris Pratt to the big wide audience that like I didn't watch Parks and Rec. So to me, Chris Pratt is
Hmm.
just brand new fresh star. Dave Batista, I know
Yeah.
is a wrestler, and most people do not watch pro wrestling. He's fresh to everybody. You don't see Vin Diesel. You just get his
Yeah, I was gonna
performance.
say
You
the
don't
two actual biggest stars you never see their faces.
right. Josh Brolin is on the come up, and that's because of this movie, as he's starting Thanos. Lee
Yeah,
Pace
and
is
he's
not super well
barely
known,
in it.
and Karen Gillan at this point is not known at all except to Doctor Who fans. And
Well, you
Doctor
also
Who is
get Glenn
against,
Close
and then Glenn Close is like a fun,
and John C. Riley.
like John C. Riley and Glenn Close are two characters that are those are good cameo pieces in which let's get some.
Yeah,
It's the Marlon Brando effect in Superman. Let's get some reliable, bankable stars that people know
yeah,
in this movie, but let's not make it so that they're the only focus in the movie.
yeah. If you want to bank some enjoyability for the audience, just throw John C. Riley in any movie, and
Correct.
they're gonna like it more.
Right, and he still has a heart in this. It's great. But all five of those actors that they did, the two that are recognizable immediately, you don't see as themselves. And
Yeah,
what makes I think Guardians so special is you see those three as those characters. You don't see those as it's another thing is like Robert Downey Jr. is so on his ass career wise when he got Iron Man. People who didn't know his career at that point, such as our age group that really didn't know Robert Downey Jr. at that time, we only see Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man.
yeah.
So when you get that cast doing that, it's such a tremendous job of getting like unknowns essentially to do it. Guardians is a great movie. Was that your 3 or was that your 4?
That was my number 3.
We're gonna stay MCU here, but it's a pick that never gets enough credit, and it should. My number 3 is Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings. That is such a good fucking movie, it's ridiculous. I will argue it's the best MC movie there is. I always will.
I just thought it was whatever. Like I had no feeling positive or negative towards it.
Oh, so good. You want to
I
talk
like
about...
I like a lot of the cast though.
So, here's the thing. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings takes characters that have no existence in the MCU at that point, which is hard to fucking do at that point in the MCU.
Yeah.
And also characters in the comic books that are not respected by general audiences, even by comic book standards.
I should also say you're going to be talking about this alone pretty much. Because I barely remember the movie.
Every time I watch this movie, I fall in love with it over and over again. It is such a highly, highly personal story with actors that immediately make you just believe they are the character because they're generally unknown to an American audience.
Yeah.
And I mean, Tony Liu and Michelle Yeoh are really the only two actors that an American audience would at least somewhat know. Michelle Yeoh is by far the number one because of James Bond.
I bet Disney and Marvel were so mad that they released it then. Because think of it, had they released it post
Everything Everywhere
and post Everything Everywhere. Yeah.
Like, people are losing their fucking minds.
Because what's the lead actor's name?
Simu Liu.
He's great in Barbie.
Oh, he's tremendous in Barbie.
He's like the scene stealer in there.
Here's another thing I think that is just towards the likability factor. Simu Liu plays a character so well, and just the traits of the human being come out where there's just something about him. You just want to root for the guy at all times.
Yeah, he's extremely likable. He's got the Chris Pratt kind of thing.
Yes, he does. And he just makes you want him to be successful. And it's such a cool place to be in. And yet, unless you're part of the niche audience that knows the projects that he was in beforehand, you don't know Simu Liu. You know, Aquafina I knew as a bit player and like really random weird stuff. That's the only reason I knew Aquafina.
Crazy Rich Asians was probably the biggest thing she's ever been in.
Right. And then, but she's playing a completely different role for her in an action movie, but she still gets to play in her wheelhouse.
Yeah.
which also is really, really smart because you're getting a fish out of water without it having to be your main character.
True. Yeah.
Because Katie's kind of the lens in which everybody can watch that movie and understand it. Where she's just like, hold on, your dad is the your dad is the leader of a worldwide crime organization who's secretly helped run the world for thousands of years, and he's just like, yep. And she just has to deal with it just like the rest of the audience. And she deals with it exactly like a lot of the audience would be, which is just uncomfortable jokes, constantly joking to break tension, but yet she's trying to be supportive of her friend. She's incredibly integral to that film, which I adore in Shang-Chi.
I remember feeling like they kind of wasted Michelle Yeoh because like I love Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Okay.
That's like a near perfect movie for me, and she's so great in that. And then I don't know, I feel like underutilized maybe.
I think it's difficult with actors that people know that you know they could do more. Sometimes it sucks when they can't do
Yeah.
more. But the
Well,
thing about
she's
it is,
like
is you're getting Michelle
she's
Yeoh at an older age.
yeah.
That I'm not justifying it that like we shouldn't put older actors in more integral roles. I mean, Sam Jackson was in his 60s already when they put him in Nick Fury. So it's not as if you can't have older actors in those roles. I just think the way the audience sees Michelle Yeoh, because she's kind of that timeless
She's
person,
kind of like motherly nowadays.
right? And so in a
But
time
like
travel
in
movie
terms
that
of
uses that to its advantage, Michelle Yeoh's
yeah,
perfect.
but
But
in terms of just physicality, I bet she's up there in the MCU actual capability physically.
oh yeah, I mean Michelle Yeoh is a one of one. Michelle Yeoh is so special. I just think if you're
Yeah,
looking like if you're talking like franchise anchor, I don't know if Michelle Yeoh is that
no,
with
no,
what the
she's not
MCU
like
is
a
trying to do.
star.
Um, she should be. I mean, I've loved every second of film I've ever seen Michelle Yeoh in. I've loved. I'm not
Yeah,
saying I have a
and
huge dearth of it, but
yeah,
everything I've ever
like
seen of Michelle
going
Yeoh, I fucking adore.
yeah, all the way going back to like the stuff she did with Jackie Chan, where it's just crazy stunts and shit
Yeah,
that she's pulling off.
yeah. I mean, I fell in love with her the first time I saw Tomorrow Never Dies. The reason to go back and watch Tomorrow Never
Well,
Dies is Michelle Yeoh.
yeah, she's the one redeemable quality of that movie.
You're getting like if you like charm, James Bond, Pierce is fine in it. Pierce is good in it,
Yeah,
but it's of the Pierce of that era of Bond, it's weak. Um,
mm, for
uh,
sure.
it's downhill from there, frankly. It's GoldenEye and then everything else, frankly. If you're actually gonna talk quality
Yeah,
of those movies, but everyone loves Pierce Brosnan as James Bond, so they don't give a fuck. They're just like, yeah, whatever, fuck it. Um, but it is such a wonderful thing where I think that's a perfect. I think that's kind of a perfect use for Michelle Yeoh. People, audiences that know Michelle Yeoh love Michelle Yeoh, and those that don't know Michelle Yeoh are always pleasantly surprised and really fall in love with her through every role she does. So when she's ancient wise teacher to Shang-Chi who needs one and is his gateway into emotional acceptance, it's perfect because immediately you buy it and you're like, I'd listen to every word Michelle Yeoh has to say. She's a genius. I would believe it. I'll take it.
I think another thing that it was too like there's no like great style to it either. It's kind of one of those MCU movies that
I would
just
disagree with that
look.
entirely.
It looks just. I don't know. Some of it just didn't work for me that much.
I also think it's incredibly powerful. Again, like the Miles Morales, Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. You're seeing what it's like to be first gen. You're seeing all those things of being an immigrant, of what it means to be Asian or be Asian American. You're getting exposed to all these different cultural aspects of Asian cultures, and yet it's not just like, hey, he's Asian. It's far more of a
Yeah,
this is a family story. It's not an Asian family story. It's just a family story. And you're getting so much exposure to so much classic storytelling through a different culture lens. It's beautiful. The sequencing on the dragon, on the two dragons, is fucking incredible to see that visually, and it's incredibly powerful to see. I love it, and it's such an emotional anchor to the MCU. There's not many MCU movies that are that emotional, and it's really easy to buy into the emotion and understand the relationship of a broken family and how everybody deals with that very differently. And that's another reason
Maybe
why
it deserves a rewatch.
I when I see Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, I was already in love with it and thought it was great, and then rewatched it the second I could on Disney Plus. And there's always the back of your mind rewatch of like, is it as good? And I'm like, nope, it's good, to the point where, um, as we've talked about on the show, just moved, right? Madison, we were sitting here, my friend came with me, she has a Tesla. We were sitting at a charging station, we had to sit there to let the battery charge. And we just started watching fucking Shang-Chi on the Tesla display. And then I got home the next day, and I just turned to Ab when I got home with time, and we were just looking for something to do to hang out. I was like, "You want to watch Shang-Chi?" And she's like, "Yeah." Rewatched it again. And I was like, "Fucking love this movie. It's so good." I really do believe it's one of the strongest pieces MCU has ever done. So I love Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings. It makes a character that is a fool in terms of people's respect for it into one of the best pieces of the MCU. That's incredibly. It's Guardians of the Galaxy level. Let's take Z-listers and make them A-listers. That's what this movie does to me. All right. Well, after this nice diatribe about Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings, number 2, Dylan. Where are you going?
Number 2, The Batman.
Also at number 2 for me is The Batman.
Love this movie.
I've said it on other shows. I'll say it again. Truest representation of the character is in the Batman. You want to understand. You want to understand Batman as a character. Watch the Batman. It's super.
Yeah. I love that it's not an origin story.
Yep.
And they spend absolutely no time telling an origin story. Like, because, yeah, it's just, at this point, it's just a waste of time, really. But, like, it sets the atmosphere so well within the first, like, 10 seconds.
Is there a better comic book movie that does that? Is there a better movie that does that of a modern era? Because you get the tone of the Batman fucking immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple, like, horror movies that I would say do that, but very few.
And
Especially because this is a genre movie. It's, like, it's not just, a horror movie.
Yeah.
It's a really gritty. It's like Seven or Zodiac.
Yeah, it's a thriller. It's really what it is.
Yeah. I would say this is as close we'll get to a superhero movie that was directed by David Fincher.
Fair.
It is so obvious the influence there.
What's crazy about the Batman is the tone set immediately, and yet it's improved upon right afterwards.
Yeah.
I like the fact that, again, it's reactionary. Batman is so fun because he reacts to things, but he's not a big preventer unless you're in the comic books. That I just love the fact that the whole scene is really set with, we have a huge problem. How do we deal with it? And then it's everybody's afraid of the dark because of him. They did that in The Dark Knight, and it works in The Dark Knight. I'm not saying it doesn't. But when they're like, oh, the opening of The Dark Knight, when they're like, oh, not tonight. Like, oh, you have a higher chance of winning the Powerball than seeing him.
Mm-hmm.
They set the tone, right?
Yeah.
They're showing 10 different locations throughout Chicago that in the dark are scary as fuck, and people are like, nope. He could be there, and I ain't going to do it.
The real unsung hero of this movie is whoever, I should say it's probably a group of people. Yeah. The sound editing and sound mixing of this movie is insane. It didn't
Incredible.
win an Oscar, which is blasphemy in my
Who
opinion.
did win?
But probably Top Gun Maverick. Probably.
For
I'd
sound
have to look.
mixing? You're talking to someone who adores Top Gun Maverick and already considers it one of his 5 favorite films of all time. The only
Yeah.
reason, the only reason that I do not think easily The Batman is the best movie of 2022 is because Top Gun Maverick just so happened to also come out in 2022. And to
Yeah.
me, I think
Well,
this is a higher quality film than Top Gun Maverick, I think. If you're looking at
I
just
think,
film, but in terms of a
and
movie experience, I think Top Gun's
yeah,
literally
if you're
like
gonna
razor thin.
if you're gonna look to like an action movie
Hmm.
and you want to mix artistry with it, this is the prime example because it's not just like willy nilly shots just covering it. You know, there's like real artistry to most of the shots. Almost all the sound design is like really stark.
Yep.
But when it's there, like when his boots are hitting the ground in that first scene introducing him,
Yep.
it is so perfect.
When you are introduced to his Batman, and he's brutal, he's more brutal than any Batman has ever been successfully. Because I would say they show Ben Affleck's Batman to be quite brutal at times, or hint at him being very brutal,
Yeah.
but it's not done as well. Because again, it's Zack Snyder. Where this, when he says, "I'm vengeance," you fucking believe it.
Yeah. And there's nothing gratuitous about it.
Right.
I I would argue it's hard to say between the Dark Knight and this, like what's the more fun watch? Because I really enjoy watching this movie. Um,
I I
but
I truly struggled with 1 and 2. I
yeah,
really
that
did. Let's just
well,
be honest. I assume 1 is the Dark Knight for you,
yes,
because
it
one
is.
one is the Dark Knight for me as well,
Yeah,
and it's difficult because I think what Nolan does is like we may as well just talk about them both kind of simultaneously
well,
and give the Dark Knight
I
its
think
time afterwards as well, because we're going to be
well,
comparing the two.
I would say we should barely talk about the Dark Knight because we're about to do that
Yeah.
podcast all about it.
Right. Um, in comparison to these two, where is one so glaring compared to the other? Like, where is one where you're just like, no, not as good as that one, or vice versa?
Well, I would argue atmosphere definitely leans towards the Batman.
Yep, I'd agree.
Like obviously Nolan has a style that he goes for and he
Yeah.
sticks to that style.
Yes, he does.
But in terms of an enjoyable, like I love how dark this movie is
Absolutely.
and how willing it is to go to really dark places, but it never feels like it's just doing that for no reason.
Yeah.
Cuz the Gotham they set up is really realistic and it's really dark,
Yep.
but it's different in terms of
It's what Chicago should look like in a drama.
yes, it's a
As
lot
someone
more
who used to live
real
there. Yeah.
than yeah, the Gotham in this is much more real than the Gotham in The Dark Knight.
Right. I think that it was so difficult for me because I think The Dark Knight is. There's almost a part of me, that hipster part of me, that had I not fallen in love with it by myself, I could easily see myself not shitting on it, but constantly being the person that says, "Hey man, I know it's good, but like, is it Sacred Cow good? I don't know." But
Hmm.
because I saw it first run when I was in love, and it just fostered my love for movies, comic books, the character as much as I did, I do still kind of consider it the Sacred Cow. Also, the Ledger performance is legendary at this point. Um,
Yeah,
but when we're looking at the Batman, there are things it does that just succeed at such a higher level. If that's what you like, I love the I love the fact that they don't try to pretend that the police aren't helping him. There are police that are weary of
Hmm.
him, but I love the fact that he just shows up and half the cops are like, "Yep." They look at him weird. They're like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" But every
Yeah,
time he comes around, we discover something. It's important for him to be here. I love the fact that Gordon's there and people question Gordon. He's like, "Shut the fuck up and let him do his job." Because he is the reason we solve half these cases. He is the reason we actually
yeah,
get this. Like, you can understand why Gordon appreciates him so much.
yeah. And they actually show Batman as a detective, which
Yes.
is a central part of the Batman
That
storyline that
is the point. It's the
a
point.
lot of the movies leave that out for some reason, which I never understand.
Right. I mean, that's the thing is you can say like the detective part in The Dark Knight is a little weak. But at least he's doing
For
something.
sure.
He's really trying
Yeah,
to do something, and it's strong in that movie. It's just weak compared to the Batman, where
yeah,
um, Batman is a constant watchdog trying to figure out the problem. And I love the fact in this he's being first of all, the Riddler was such a smart choice. You get away from
hmm,
oh, first we need Joker. It's like no, you need to. It's the same thing. Batman Begins was so smart for not using the Joker right away
yeah,
because it then lets Batman be the focus. The second you put the Joker in something and you have a strong performance, the Joker is the star. Batman is the secondary
yeah,
because Joker is such a flamboyantly popular character. But he's a
yeah,
flamboyant character that takes attention. He fills the vacuum that Batman allows to have around him because it's something it's Brian Bolland. He was the artist on Batman the Killing Joke, which is one of the most legendary popular comic book arcs or stories ever written, right? And he said as an artist, Joker's so much more fun and tangible and interesting to play with, whereas Batman almost works better as a shadow, as a monolithic 2D
hmm,
character who's just there to like slap reality back into
yeah,
place. Which is a really interesting take on the character, and it's not necessarily I agree that he should only be monolithic in 2D, but there is something to it where he has to be the sentinel that's just holding the
yeah,
line. Um, but what the Batman does in this movie to create its atmosphere, to make you believe in the characters, is tremendous. I love the fact that they show Batman not inherently being nice, but they show their Batman at least being agreeable to the point where he could work with someone. Because it doesn't make sense that Batman would be so my way or the highway that he would fuck himself over in a case to do so.
yeah. They really, I guess it's not that subtle, but the stuff where like he sees the kid who's just lost his father,
Yep.
like that's a good way of doing that without any dialogue needed.
Well, the funny part is this movie, when you actually think about it, does more to as an origin story, ironically enough, than any of the origin stories do. Because the theming of the weight of family is throughout this entire movie.
Sure. Yeah.
And to
It's like
have to have that
it's like
emotional
an
weight is so important.
yeah. It's like an abstract origin because
Yeah.
they never like truly show an origin or anything.
No, and you don't get the shot, you don't get anything, but you see the haunting of what he has become because of it.
Yeah.
And then you see the weight of what it means to be a Wayne to him. What does it mean where this is the first time that you feel the impact of Bruce's family on the city, which is really kind of crazy because
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever been failed in any movie where they at least show you and tell you and do a lot of like Bruce is
Yeah.
out there, he's doing shit like even in the original Batman when people see Bruce Wayne they're like, "Oh my god, Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne." Like you get it. He's a big deal.
Yeah.
and you understand like his family lineage because of his presence, right? But this, through the renewal fund, through the corruption that was there, you see how important his family was and why he feels the need to continue a legacy,
Yeah.
even if it's a complex one. Um, and I've said this so many times, it's the truest representation of the character. There is not a better superhero action sequence to understand a character better than when he cuts that fucking wire, falls in, and then instead of I'm going to look for another fight or I'm going to look for more villains or no, I'm going to light up a flare, help people in need and lead them to safety, and then when they're on top of the roof, still keep going in and out to keep saving people.
And again,
That's what the Batman does.
yeah, and again, that shot is beautiful. Like, there's a lot of shots in the movie that are just like straight up in any movie you would go, wow.
That shot, the whole end, the entire ending to really wrap up characters in this movie is brilliant. They're all beautiful. I think about the Penguin overlooking the city in disarray, and he just sees opportunity. I'm like, that's the fucking Penguin. That's what I'm
Yeah.
fucking talking about. You know, the two motorcycles in tandem, and then they both have to go their separate ways. That is those two characters
It's,
so perfectly done.
yeah, it's like boiling down character points, important character points, but they're doing it in the most simplistic way, and it takes like 4 seconds each of them.
Right.
Like, you don't need all the going on. You don't need like huge. Yeah, it's hard to say because like the Dark Knight, a lot of it is dialogue, like great dialogue,
Right.
and a lot of this is like just great visuals.
Visual storytelling at its
Not to say it's
finest.
weak. Yeah, it's not weak or anything in the writing or anything,
No,
but
it's not. I just think that you already said it, and I was just kind of building to that visual point. When he's holding that flare and his cape is over the water, and you're seeing the top-down view, and you're seeing people that are in fear of him, and seeing that's a man who's trying to help me in this moment, and I'm going to follow him, and he looks like a religious figure almost, leading them to safety. It's such a beautiful shot to show why he is important. There's a
mm-hmm.
reason that he is the uncontested number one superhero the world over. It's because of shots
Yeah,
like that. It's because there is a humanity to him that every single person on this planet can understand in some way, shape, or form. And
yeah,
I'm one person, I can make a difference, and he does it. And I love just as much of an important shot. You don't see Batman in daylight, and I love the fact that they show him in daylight when there's a job to do, where they're on top of Gotham Square Garden. That one did bother me a little bit. Just name it a little bit better, guys. But that's like super nitpicky though. But when
yeah,
they're on top of the arena, and he carries that woman to the stretcher or whatever, you know, to the gurney that's on uh, the string down from the helicopter, and she just grasps him and she's like, "Please don't leave me." And he just reassures her, doesn't say a word, doesn't break the facade of Batman, but just calmly reassures her, put her
yeah.
there, and then goes right back to work. That's why people would believe in a character like Batman to be real. That's why people would believe in a
Mm-hmm.
figure like Batman. And it's such a powerful moment. It's such a powerful 5 minutes of that movie where
Yeah,
I'm going to risk life and limb. I'm going to risk my own safety. I'm going to risk people I care about. I'm going to risk, so much to save these people because they need me. And I love them because they're part of this entity that I feel I'm responsible for. You buy it. Hook, line, and sinker in
mm-hmm.
this movie. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. there's like a crazy amount of like great, I would almost say iconic shots. Like Catwoman and Batman up on the building where they're overlooking the skyline.
Yep.
That's great.
That's
I
straight out. That's
love,
straight out of a Jim Lee. Like that's taking the best of Jim Lee's Hush run and just saying, "Let's use it."
yeah.
Beautiful.
I I love the opening shot. One of the opening shots where the politician walks, and then behind him is the Riddler, just stone cold, silent, and just standing there,
Yep.
and you can just barely see him. Love that.
Yep.
I love the shot where Paul Dano's just in the cafe by himself. It's like so dark around him, and then it's just lit up in the little restaurant.
Yep.
That looks great.
It's beautiful.
And then obviously the trailer shot where the upside down, and then Batman's coming straight towards us,
Yeah.
and then it flips. That's a great shot.
It's shot beautifully. You see the impact of Batman, but you see he's still tangible to the people of Gotham because he interacts with people in Gotham. Where, he's like, oh, I have to go to the Iceberg Lounge to fuck someone up to get some answers? Fine. I'll go to the Iceberg Lounge to fuck
Yeah.
someone up and get some answers.
I also love that he wears the Batman suit to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not normally something you would see.
No, they'd be like, oh, we got to infiltrate with Bruce. And I'm going to be honest,
Yeah.
even as a Batman fan, if I were making a movie, I don't know if I'd be brave enough to make that choice. I would be like,
Yeah.
but I would have done it as a way of honoring the comic books even more. It's like, let's send Matches Malone in. Bruce's alter ego that he kind of dresses up a little bit for to do that. But it's very comic booky, right?
Yeah.
Where I would have just said that's a great way to nod to the comics and not make yourself so fucking conspicuous that you're like, Jesus Christ. But at the same time, he doesn't give a fuck. He's just like, I love the fact that he just uses the door. He doesn't try to do his whiz bang pow, I'm going through the roof. Fuck it. He's just like, I'm going to show up at your doorstep and I'm going to, just by my mere presence, threaten you to let me inside.
Yeah. And a lot of his like one-liners that could come across really cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at Batman and Robin.
Yep.
Like a lot of his one-liners are actually, they're intended to be badass, and they actually succeed in that.
He is a badass.
Yeah, where he says, obviously the vengeance line.
That's
so like
good.
Just beating the fuck out of that guy. And then where the twins are talking to him.
Yeah.
At the Iceberg Lounge, and then he says, "Yours or mine," about the blood.
Yeah.
Love that. There's like great. Yeah, it's not. It's very subtle, I would say, in this movie. Like Bruce and Batman, there's not too much like character stuff, really.
Right.
In terms of like, oh, this scene is about, like, I think of The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Where you got Michael Caine and Christian Bale. And then in that one scene, it's just all about some people just want to watch the world burn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like a moral kind of thing.
Right.
And they're talking about it. In this movie, there's not much talking, and it's not like they're getting morality through actions rather than words.
Right. This is a textbook on how do I tell my story through showing and not telling. It's textbook in that. And again, you already said it. It's not weak writing at all. It's great writing. Great dialogue here.
Yeah.
Great use of how to make every character's dialogue is so necessary and important. I really cannot. I truly cannot think of a wasted moment in this movie that doesn't in some way enrich the tapestry of the story, and it's all about that. And what's crazy to me is like we've been talking about so many movies for 2.5 hours now, and almost 3 hours I think now. But what's insane to me is, especially with the Batman, but we've barely talked about any like sequences We haven't talked about any like big moments in terms of like action. It's been really character driven. It's been really
Well, okay. How about this? What's the most badass moment to you?
in the Batman.
Yeah.
Oh god, there's so many good badass
I
moments.
mine is also one I should have put in the like great beautiful shots
Yeah,
where they're shooting the bullets in the darkness and it's just bouncing off of them. I love that.
that's a pretty great scene. Um, Honestly, most badass. I don't even know. I really
I
don't.
also like I also like when he injects some stuff with
That's
the
I did think about that one.
is it supposed to be adrenaline?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. Cuz it's like a weird like slimy green you would get as a kid.
Right. It was an interesting.
Yeah.
I almost feel like it might be a nod to Bane, with the Venom, but
Maybe, yeah, yeah.
that's a real stretch. That's just me trying to grasp at
Yeah.
something to understand the color choice of it. But I really do believe it's in the little moments. The yours or mine. All the actually, it's him. One of the most badass scenes is him ready to wreck shop, surrounded by a room of cops, and he does not give a fuck.
Uh,
They try to take his
yeah,
mask
that
off.
is
He gets
awesome.
up and he just says, "Fuck all of you. I'm gonna take your police chief in my hands right now, and I do not give a fuck."
Yeah.
Like and I love that the police chief is just being an asshole to him with one of his deputies in his arms, ready to beat the fuck out of him, and he's still trying to play the power game. And I'm like,
Yeah.
do you understand who you're talking to? Like, do you really
Yeah.
think this is gonna work? And that's why I just love that scene because it's tangible. He's so outnumbered, and he's still just like, nope, I'm the fucking Batman, and I will kick all of your
Yeah.
asses if I have to.
The amount of like underrated talent in this movie is insane. Here, one sec.
It's another iteration of the Dark Knight with this is not a star-studded cast. This is an
Yes.
incredibly loaded, talented class that's very deep as a roster.
I'll just read the credits that are on the movie box. Robert Pattinson, who
Yep.
I think is one of the most underrated actors.
Tremendous. He's a tremendous
I've
actor.
I've I've always thought he was good. I mean, obviously the Twilight movies suck,
Yep.
but like that's not his fault. Um, Zoe Kravitz, awesome.
Great.
Paul Dano, another super underrated actor. Jeffrey Wright, John Turturro, Peter Skarsgård, who I really love in another movie called An Education. Check it out if you haven't seen it.
He's a tremendous actor. Tremendous character actor as well.
Yeah, like it's like all around it is just talented people, and it's like that's how you make a movie succeed.
Right.
Just get talented people, and most likely it will turn out good.
And we know in the deleted scenes in the tease, we have Barry Kogan
Yeah,
as our Joker coming up too. So they have an
with
eye to the future. I think it's an
I
inspired choice. I think it's a really inspired choice.
I like the choice of actor. I'm just not sold on his portrayal of it yet. Like I'm really gonna have to wait to see a full movie.
Sure. I mean, the other thing is this: is I've always stated this. I don't understand why. I think I may have talked about it on a podcast before. I don't understand the need. I understand the want. I don't understand the need to constantly make it one single solitary story on the Joker. I'm like, he should just be a constant presence to piss Batman off. That and
Mm-hmm.
then you build to no, I'm gonna make you remember why I'm that important.
Yeah,
I and so I'm excited for that, but I also hope we get another good secondary villain in the second Batman film, so that we get
there's only there's only one part aspect of the movie that it works,
Yeah.
but I wish it was a little different, and that's Arkham. I feel like no one ever utilizes how awesome Arkham could be,
Yep.
because like I don't even play video games that much, but those video games, like they're awesome. Just the look of them,
Yep.
the production design you could go with Arkham Asylum would be insane.
Arkham is the untapped goal. Like
Yeah,
it's so hard in today's comic book movie universe that is now getting into the deeper rosters of comics that fans have always really wanted to see. You know, the idea that even 10 years ago you were going to get to see deep level Doctor Strange shit was
hmm
in was laughable to so many people. And
yeah,
now we're getting into that. And yet we have yet to see Arkham really be done well. And that's where
yeah,
I think one of the things is I think the best Arkham probably has been in Batman Begins. Um,
yeah,
but it's shown more as corrupt hospital
yeah,
versus I almost wish they would do the Batman could have done this and I think they could still utilize it is I love Arkham being put into the category of Arkham is the biggest example of how Gotham is still an old corrupt city in which
hmm
they're just like, no, we're putting crazy people there. It's like you can't treat people like that anymore. You know, and they're just like, fuck you. We think they're a problem.
yeah,
They're going to Arkham, and that's where you can and like they can have the ammunition to say, we need a place like this. We have Jokers, we have Riddlers, we have this, we have this, we have this. We have all these crazy people who don't belong in society,
yeah.
and
Well,
but they don't belong in normal ass prison either.
yeah.
So,
Do you know Silence of the Lambs pretty well?
oh yeah, of course.
Think of like the warden in Silence of the Lambs in charge of Arkham.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it would fit in perfectly too with like the corruption and everything
Right.
that they already set up.
Yeah. The atmosphere of the Batman could make Arkham really, really good. I just think they're trying to be so grounded in reality
Yeah.
that they don't want to do it to the point where I mean I think Arkham is a gold mine for anything. I think it's the like I said it's the biggest untapped gold mine in comic book movies left because there is not those that want to say Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery is the best are out of their fucking
hmm
minds. People want to say Superman or Flash also has a great rogues gallery. I'm not saying they're bad rogues gallery. They're great rogues galleries. They're phenomenal. Nothing touches
Well,
Batman's rogue gallery. Nothing.
just in terms of recognizable names, Batman wins.
Right. And so but in terms of real impact of the villains, that's one thing that always bolsters the Batman character so well is the villains of Arkham. And how
hmm
many of them have such interesting and unique backstories, how they all have real pathos to them psychologically. They all have something that makes them really unique and distinctive. And that's what takes the Z-listers up or brings, A-listers down is
hmm
Marvel villains for the most part fucking suck. They're just
Yeah,
they're they're
they're
flavor of the month
boilerplate.
villains. They're just such okay, they're the opposite of the character most of the time, especially in the MCU. Let's just get the
Yeah,
counterpart. People are like, "Oh, Batman and Joker, they're counterparts." I'm like, "They are, but it's ideological. It's not
yeah.
they're not just like, "Oh, I'm the evil version of you." And that's what works so well with these characters and what the Batman does really well and to not be able to play an Arkham more. Oh, it hurts my feelings because
Maybe,
I mean, shit. I even have an
maybe,
idea for an Arkham
maybe
Asylum
they
theme
will.
park ride. For fuck's sake, like Arkham is brilliant.
Maybe they will. Who knows?
I hope they do, but it's a great reflection on a movie where if you have to nitpick to their interpretation of a prison, it
Yeah,
shows how fucking good the movie is. If you're like, God, I wish they would just
yeah,
do a little bit more with Arkham. It's like the rest of the movie is like near perfection or perfect,
yeah.
and you're just like, yeah, but what about Arkham? Like,
The funny thing is, I actually think the Batman's an underrated movie. Like, I feel like a lot of people either skipped it or they weren't prepared for the contrast,
I
because
think
it's way different than most Batman
I
movies.
think it does suffer from two really big cultural things. One, I think in the timing of the social media era with The Dark Knight, in which Batman Begins starts at like the very, very touches of the social media era, and then The Dark Knight Rises ends at the height of the Twitter, Facebook,
Yeah,
the beginning of Instagram era. And the population that grew up with The Dark Knight still sees that as the definitive Batman. Where I mean, shit, we were
mhm,
like, what was it? 2 days ago, 3 days ago, Ab and I were in the car, and she still said like, I will only ever see Batman as Christian. She's like, Batman is Christian Bale to me, and although I'm always open to a new interpretation of Batman that's of a high quality,
mhm.
uh, I just didn't understand the impact that I didn't realize. Not that I didn't realize. I didn't know how many people were incapable of doing a new thing. They wanted
Yeah,
Batman the way they wanted Batman. They weren't capable of seeing Batman in a different light. And I think that's where that might even be a multiverse problem that the MCU has right now. People aren't ready for all these different interpretations of all these characters. They just want the truest representation of these characters.
yeah,
But I think it suffers from A, proximity to the Dark Knight, and B, proximity to Batman versus Superman. Because I think
yeah,
Batman versus Superman had enough clearly difference, clear differentiations from the Dark Knight that people were, if it were good, people could have been like, "Hey, man, it's not Christian, but like this is different, and we love it."
yeah.
And but it's
Also,
buried in shit that people didn't want to do it.
yeah, there was like the DC is just a mess.
I think the Batman is another a great example of why quality will always win, but that means overall quality of everything you're doing. There's a reason people still will watch me still even when it's reviewed mediocrely or poorly, people still feel the need to go watch Marvel movies because they built up
Hmm.
such a cachet that they had to do so. The Batman is the one lone project in like 5 years at DC that is universally praised.
Yeah,
People adore that film. And yet, and the box office did well. It's not as if it sucked at the box office. It made a
yeah.
lot of money.
I think it was right around like 750 million.
And in what world is if DC is even remotely okay, does that movie not make $1 billion?
Yeah. Well, in terms of quality, it should have.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like
But
in the world we
yeah,
inhabit where DC has no people have no faith in DC to make
yeah,
quality
that's the problem.
films. The other thing is this, Warner Brothers itself, what has Warner Brothers really made that has stuck in the last 10 years?
Not much.
I mean, what, Mad Max Fury Road? Um,
Well, the problem is they're so desperate to get like a tent pole, a real tent pole.
mhm.
Because they tried it with Fantastic Beasts, didn't work. They tried it with the Zack Snyder DC universe, didn't
Yep.
work.
Yep.
And yeah, they're
Clearly
just
they
desperate.
clearly want more Mad Max. They clearly want that cuz they know it
Yeah,
works.
but
Uh,
even that, it didn't work.
right. And I haven't seen Furiosa. Don't know if it's good or not. I
I've
plan
heard it's good, but it didn't do well.
right, and also I think it was foolish to go bad. Mad Max is not a franchise. Mad Max is a series that has movies in it, and they all have to speak on their own.
Yeah.
Mad Max is not a franchise. Is though we go back because Mad Max. Like you have to be in
Mhm.
the Mad Max has to be of its time to do well, and that's why Fury
Yeah.
Road did so well. It was of its time. Um, but it is a shame that the Batman is not even bigger than what it is because that is your franchise. That is where you just go. We're Warner Brothers.
Easily.
We're the oldest, most glorious movie franchise the world or movie studio the world has ever seen in terms of cumulative movie history. Warner
Hmm.
Brothers is, I mean, Warner Brothers is the studio, and yet Warner Brothers and DC films are a fucking laughing stock in the last 15 years. And I mean,
Since
you have the end of the Dark Knight trilogy, and that's it.
like 2012, 2013.
Yeah, because I mean, they were rolling in cash and rolling in quality with Harry Potter and Batman at that time,
Yeah.
and they had Superman along the way, and Man of Steel at least did capture some imagination. It was coming during the superhero craze, and so
Hmm.
and DC didn't have any bad will at that time or ill will. Now, that you people did not realize the amount of bullshit you have to cut through as an audience member and how much bullshit studios have to do to cut through the bullshit to get audiences back to wanting to be a part of their movies.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things is I think James Gunn will do a good job with Superman, which makes the Batman even more complicated because it's like, where does he fit in? I'm glad they want to do another one.
Yeah.
I would prefer if they just kept doing standalone Batman movies. I'm fine with that. But I
I
am excited for a universe because it's James Gunn, but that's the only reason.
right, and I also don't know if James Gunn is the right guy. He just has such a unique sensibility that I don't think is I feel like we might just get a better version of Zack Snyder. We're going to get James Gunn's universe. We're not going to get the DC universe.
James Gunn is much more of a
Oh, he's so much better. I'm
like
not comparing them talent wise.
just in terms of the fundamentals of storytelling. He is
Oh,
he's
fuck.
really solid in that.
I mean,
So
shit.
like,
Peacemaker's rad. Who the fuck cared about that character? And he made
yeah,
Peacemaker rad.
I really like the Suicide Squad that he did. I really enjoyed that movie.
It's a good movie. I didn't care for it all that much, but it is a good movie. I was just kind of like, whatever. Okay, Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
Um,
it was unexpectedly good, I would say.
yes, it was. It's just it again. It's the crying shame of it's the circle around the Batman. It's not
Mhm. Yeah,
it's not there. Now we should just finish up. We should say something about the Dark Knight, even though we are going to have a podcast about it. In
I'll
the
say two words. It's great.
Do you think it's absurd that people still to this day believe it's the best comic book movie?
No, I think that makes perfect sense. Cause like the quality is undeniable.
Yeah.
Plus, you don't have to love Batman to really enjoy the movie.
No. Well, here's something I will say for this conversation. We've talked Shang-Chi got impact points, Guardians of the Galaxy got a lot of impact points, Logan got a lot of impact points, Wonder Woman got a lot of impact points, and so did Winter Soldier of what they did for their studios or what they did for an audience, right? It cannot be understated how important The Dark Knight is to the comic book movie.
Mm-hmm.
Batman Begins is a phenomenal film. There is not anything bad to say about Batman Begins, frankly. But The Dark Knight is what made even studios. It made the fucking Academy pay attention to comic book movies. Where it was undeniable. The fact that The Dark Knight helps change the rules of the Academy of Motion
That's true.
Pictures because we can only have five. It's like, fuck you for telling me The Dark Knight is not one of the best movies of this year that doesn't deserve to get a Best Picture nomination.
Yeah.
But in a weird way, it works in The Dark Knight's favor because then it overshadows anything in 2008 except The Dark Knight because everyone's like, that movie's so good, it was fucking robbed and it's bullshit and we
Yeah.
love this movie. Um, I'm not saying there isn't good cinema in 2008. There is good cinema in 2008. But The Dark
One
Knight,
Dog Millionaire.
but it is abundantly clear The Dark Knight is
It's the best movie of the year, for
it's
sure.
the best thing that ever came out that year, and it's the best thing really in a lot of years around it. And people will never understand that impact unless they're really trying to do deep dives like this, where you just
Yeah.
see,
And
I'm going to take characters seriously.
yeah, and it's so easy to just say, "Oh, it's great for a superhero movie." Like you can't do that with The Dark Knight.
No.
You just say it's a great movie. Doesn't matter what genre
It is a great movie that has a superhero in it. It is not a great superhero movie that is good. You know, it changes the paradigm from we need to make a great superhero movie to we need to make a great movie with this hero.
Yeah.
And it's an absolute game changer of a film that is so well produced, so well directed, so well acted. I mean, everything about The Dark Knight is chef's kiss.
Near perfect.
Or perfect in a lot of ways. It's
Yeah,
near perfection or perfect. Yeah.
I'd say it's pretty close to perfect.
It's pretty damn close. It's as close as modern film probably can get. And no different than old cinema. Old cinema, it's not like old cinema is perfect because it's old cinema. There's a lot of bad old cinema too. But
Oh yeah, of course.
but
There's a lot of bad movies that were nominated for Best Picture. Like the list I'm going through right now, there's a lot where I'm like, Jesus,
yeah,
this is not very good.
right. And it is a huge reflection point to see The Dark Knight where it is. And it is the understated respect that it deserves. That everyone's just like, yo.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Michael Jordan of the era, where like
True.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of metrics that would suggest LeBron is better than MJ,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still that whole like, no, MJ's MJ. Like,
Yeah.
The Dark Knight is kind of the Michael Jordan of comic book movies, where everyone's like, this. It's like, he's good, kid. He ain't Michael Jordan good. Like, it's kind of that. It's kind of got that vibe. But it's such a good film. But rattle off your top 10 quick. I'll rattle off my top 10 quick, and then we'll get the hell out of here.
All right. We got from 10 to 1, Avengers Endgame, X-Men Days of Future Pants, as I call it, Logan, Infinity War, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Batman Begins, X-Men 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, The Batman, The Dark Knight.
All right. And then mine, I had number 10, Into the Spider-Verse. 9, Wonder Woman. 8 was Logan, just like Dylan. 7 was Captain America the Winter Soldier. 6 was Deadpool 2. Number 5, my boy, Tim Burton making Batman Returns. 4 was Avengers Endgame. 3, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I think Dylan was most surprised by that one.
Yeah.
Number 2 was the Batman, and number 1 was the Dark Knight.
I bet if you went back and looked at my reaction to when you announced Shang-Chi,
Yeah.
it'd just be pure confusion.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I it's burned into my brain already. You're just like, what?
Yeah. It's out there.
But again, it's a phenomenal film. But that is going to do it here on this episode. Give us your top 10 lists in the comments section, viewers and listeners. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to get your opinions. And maybe one day, if you guys do a good enough job listening and watching and doing stuff with us, one day we'll do the 10 worst comic book movies of all time. And we'll suffer through those movies to do the research.
Oh god.
And Madam Web is guaranteed to be on that list, so don't you
Oh, it's
worry.
down there. It's gonna be right in the top three, hovering around there.
Hovering around what? The Catwoman movie. Um, I've never watched Catwoman. I just know it's historically
Uh,
brutal.
see, I would. The funny thing is, I'd leave Batman and Robin off that list because I really enjoy it actually as a shitty movie.
I can't argue the same point. It hurts my feelings too much. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
it's such a bad movie. It's such a bad movie. But the worst part is this: we've gotten so many more superhero movies. There is a true mathematical possibility Batman and Robin would not be on that list.
Yeah, easily. There's got to be 10 worse movies than that.
I mean, Madam Web is in existence as of 2024. Like,
I'm
Jesus
sure.
Christ.
I'm sure Morbius would be on there.
Morbius, I can tell you this as someone who I didn't quit watching Batman and Robin knowing what the movie was. I quit watching Morbius at the 45-minute mark. I was like, I cannot do this. It's just so bad. I cannot do it.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yikes. But let us know what you think in the comments section. Tell us your favorite movie. Give us your top 10. Let us know how you think we're a bunch of morons. You can troll us. That's fine. We love our trolls. They're fun.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Cole Sprouse isn't in any superhero movies.
That would guide Dylan's decision as to what the worst one is.
Yes.
But give us your top 10. Give us a like, a comment, subscribe. If you want to support us more, go check out all of our podcasts. You can find those on YouTube and Spotify. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. We had 3 new shows for you. The ONETA Show, the ONETA Football Show, which is doing a lot of expansion stuff right now, which is fun. And the ONETA Movie Show you're already here for. Plus, we have content Monday through Saturday as well on YouTube that you can go check out. Check out our socials at TikTok and Instagram. And throw us a couple fucking shuckles and go to ptcreative.etsy.com and buy some merch. It'd be cool if you could do that. Plus, then you get something for yourself. So go do that. But that has been our top 10 list. I think we're tired as fuck with this right now, but
Yeah.
but go watch a comic book movie and see how your day goes. Peace, love, and hugs to you all. Bye.